Great, so we'll get underway. Call the regular meeting of Township Council for Monday, December 4th to order. And of course, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the meeting is taking place on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, acknowledge our valued relationships with the Kwantlen, Katzie, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. With that, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'd like to remove item I1 on special closed and put it in the open meeting, please.
Ms. Bauer, is this the appropriate place to do that?
I don't believe we can vary the agenda on the closed meeting as we're adopting this meeting. It would be for discussion at council at the closed meeting in the first section of the meeting as to whether they wish to remove that item from the agenda.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Van Popta?
Yeah, I'd like to add item P3. I've handed out a copy to everybody.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rint. Call the question on that addition of P3. That carries. Councillor Richter opposed. Now back to the main A1 as amended. Any further discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, I call the question on A1 as amended. And that carries. Councillor Richter opposed. Item B1, get a motion please to adopt the regular council meeting minutes of November 20th. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Call the question on B1. Councillor Van Popta? Yeah. That carries. Councillor Richter opposed. Get a motion please to adopt the public hearing meeting minutes of November 20th. Moved by Councillor Rint, seconded by Councillor Martins. Any discussion on B2? Seeing none, call the question on B2. That carries unanimously. So get on to D1, the 2024 draft budget presentation. And before you get started, I want to appreciate the fact that this is here as early in the process as it is. This is a bit earlier than we're used to seeing, and it's great to see it here early in December, to have it potentially before council early in the new year, well in advance of the April-May timeframe, which is typical. So again, I want to appreciate you for all the work to get it to this stage by the first week of December. With that, I'll turn it over to you. Ms. Ruff. Oh, Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question. In the past, we have had budgets in December. I'm not sure why this would be a deviation.
Mr. Bagan, do you feel the need to even go ahead?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I was going to express thanks to the finance team as well. We have had various start dates depending upon the complexity of the budget, and I think this is one of the probably more challenging years we're seeing with rising costs and revenues holding flat. So I wanted just to express that and confirm that the start date very much depends upon the effort that the team has put into it, and it's been significant.
Councillor Martins?
Thank you. I'm wondering if this is it for us to discuss, or if there will be a council workshop where we can have a round table and actually get into the details of this budget.
Mr. Bagan, I think we were going to maybe get through the presentation and look at what some options council may want to consider, right?
Certainly, Your Worship, I would simply add, you're right, it's up to council to consider which is the best and the most appropriate path after we've got the matter on the table.
Can they start the presentation? That'd be great. Ms. Ruff, go ahead. Oh, turn those on. There we go.
Your Worship, members of council, my name is Karmjeet Mahil. I'm the Manager of Financial Planning. And together with Sandra Ruff, Director of Finance, we will be presenting the 2024 draft operating and capital budgets. This is the draft budget timeline. After today's presentation, we are looking for council's direction to move to a 5-year financial plan and bylaw and to proceed with public consultation. This is a refresher on the major revenue and cost drivers in the utilities. These bar graphs show the revenue and cost categories for 2024 in the utilities, excluding utility user rates. Of the expense categories shown here, the regional district charges are the largest. some of the budget issues and challenges we have encountered are inflation. The 2022 general inflation in BC was 6.9%. Although it settled to a lower annual average of approximately 3.3% in 2023, contracts and contracted services have lagged in including the 2022 inflation, which has impacted the current year. Of course, one biggest cost here are the Greater Vancouver Sewerage and Drainage District, the Water District Metro tipping fees, and the Sierra Waste. These tables show the Metro Vancouver regional charges. The water rate increases for 2024, it's 7.6%. For sewerage and drainage, it's 19.7%. Note future years also have significant increases. This slide shows what we contribute from operating to infrastructure costs. Transfers to reserves and surplus for current and future year projects, debt servicing, asset maintenance for ongoing contracts. Summary of the 2024 budget changes in the utilities. We have fairly significant increases in utilities driven by Metro Vancouver charges in water and sewer, Sierra Waste contract for garbage collection, and transfers to reserve, which are being increased for future new infrastructure and replacement of current infrastructure. This is resulting in a utility user fee increase in water of 6.93%, in sewer of 10.94%, and in solid waste of 10.32%. There are a couple of projects being requested for one-time funding. Brookswood pressure reducing valve upgrade study for $50,000 and the sanitary sewer pump upgrade study for $50,000. Of course, this is contingent upon adequate prior year surplus funding availability. Moving on to the draft operating budget for universal services. Similar to what I've already said, inflation and supply chain issues. However, this is not always a direct indicator of municipal cost drivers, which include Metro Vancouver levies, RCMP contracts, and construction contract, which generally trend above CPI. This is a list for reference of items referred to the budget process. The status has been noted. This is a refresher of the major revenue and cost drivers in universal services. The biggest ones here, salary and wage contracts. IAFF has settled only to the end of 2021, and the special contracts, namely the RCMP. Revenue categories for 2024, we have a bar graph. This is excluding property taxes, so it just shows the different categories. Cost categories for 24 in universal services. As you can see, salary and wages is the largest expense, followed by the RCMP contract. Some of the budget issues and challenges, as discussed previously, inflation. Here we also have the RCMP contract and the Fraser Valley Regional Library contract, as well as As noted before, IAFF contract expired in 2021. The QP contract will expire at the end of 2024. Okay, regional costs. So the general increase in the RCMP contract from 23 to 24 has gone up by 4.372 million. This makes up 2.63% of the total property tax rate proposed in this draft budget. In addition to this, the 2023 annualization of the 5 RCMP members is a further cost of $569,525. The RCMP increases are made up of both direct and indirect costs. Salaries, pay increase has made up about $598,000. Overtime pay has made up $529,000. There's been an increase in new vehicles and replacement of old vehicles, resulting in an increase of approximately $1 million. And professional and special services increase of $566,000, which includes training, interview room system replacement, body cameras, etc. The indirect costs, the largest here is an increase of 1.2 million, and it is increase in special leave costs and health services. This graph shows the average cost per RCMP member by cost element based on our prior slide. Costs per RCMP member have gone up from $202,571 to $227,810. The authorized versus average actual strength. 5 members were added, so we have gone from 158.65 authorized strength to 163.65. And the average actual strength has also gone up from 131.3 to 136.83. Following is a summary of the budget changes in universal services. These are the non-discretionary budget requests. Salaries and wages, 3.16%. The annualizations from 2023, which include 7 positions, for which budget was added only for part of 2023, so this is the remaining amount we have to factor in. Fire positions added in the amount of $773,000. Fire fleet increase of $135,000. This is vehicles with excess mileage, so costs are increasing for their repair and maintenance. There was annualization of firefighters from 23 for 11 of them for 9 months for $1.12 million. As noted on a previous slide, the RCMP contract increased $4.372 million. We're adding 2 RCMP officers July 1st, $228,000. And the annualization of RCMP officers from 2023, which were 5, for approximately $570,000. We're adding 3 bylaw officers starting July 1st, $223,000. This also includes budget for their vehicle rental costs, and also the annualization of the bylaw officers, 3 of them from 2023, which is approximately $78,000. Additional positions added, 2 planner 2s, 1 engineering technologist 2, and 2 plan reviewers. These were all approved in council meetings. Programs, these are the programs, these relate to ones that currently exist and require increased funding to maintain service levels. Salish Place Museum is costing another approximately $127,000. The enhanced community events walkable lights was pre-approved in council for $34,400. There is a debt provision that was not required, so we are removing the $750,000. Operating efficiencies and cost cutting relate to vacancies and divisions finding areas in which they have reduced budgets. We have added a transfer to the fire equipment replacement reserve of $539,000, bringing back recreation revenue to pre-COVID levels, $1.5 million. Some other revenue and expense, and the revenue increases are mainly in community development, and growth was slightly different than what we budgeted for in 2023, and this year we are estimating property tax revenue from growth to be 2.25%. Resulting in a non-discretionary base budget increase of 6.14%. The discretionary budget requests include enhanced community events. These include the summer nights, concerts, movies, Canada Day, and enhancements to the current programs. There's also an additional $41,000 for enhanced community events walkable lights. With the previous $34,000, this would total $75,000. Also, we are removing the Nothing Without Effort grant budget. It's also a reduction of the community grant budget in the amount of $100,000. The snow and ice control sidewalk program is being brought in over 2 years. This year is $642,000. Rain garden operating costs, $200,000. You will see that $250,000 for this is also being funded in capital. Paving, $842,000. A solicitor starting on October 1st, resulting in approximately $45,000 this year. Next year will be approximately $135,000. Transfer to capital projects reserve is being increased by $2.6 million to assist with funding capital projects. There's a transfer to snow and ice reserve in the amount of $150,000. And a transfer to facilities renewal reserve in the amount of $500,000. The transfer from the RCMP reserve of $605,000 is to help absorb the impact of large increases in the RCMP contract. The transfer from CAC reserves is to help fund CAC eligible projects. This total results in 1.45%. The current draft budget with non-discretionary at 6.14% and discretionary at 1.45% results in a total of 7.59%. The new 2024 one-times being proposed are outlined below. The first 5 relate to fire training program. Then there's subdivision and development servicing bylaw regarding tree protection of $100,000. The Fraser Highway Neighborhood Community Plan, $350,000. Facility transitions, which is upcoming facility and equipment work, in the amount of $800,000. Internal debt provisions, the interest, temporary borrowing from stat reserves until permanent funding is in place. And we have, as per previous years, corporate operating contingency. This year we have a mayor operating contingency and a transfer to capital projects reserve to assist, a one-time to assist with required capital projects. The following slide is the library services. The Fraser Valley Regional Library's annual contract increase, $382,000. Some additional staffing in Fort Langley Library, $38,000. We have put in a contribution to the Library Reserve Fund of $680,000 to establish a healthy reserve required for a new library. The revenue from growth estimated similar as in Universal, 2.25%, which results in $145,000. So non-discretionary base budget increase for library, $956,000, resulting in a 2024 library operating budget of $7.383 million. This slide here shows the estimated impact on a representative house. As you can see, out of the Metro Vancouver municipalities, we are near the bottom for general municipal taxes. Here is the change for the property tax increase. You're looking at another for a total of $181.85. So adding that to the 23 for 24, it's $2,577.85. Then you have your library services, additional amount of $13.71. And if you, usually everyone is paying property tax increase and the library services. So you'll see the cumulative total in the far right. So that's $2,683.56. And then, of course, there is water, sanitary, sewer, and solid waste. We also have done a slide on the estimated impact on a condominium, estimated value of $767,000. So the property tax increase is change of $93.91. And for library service, $7.11. And then water, $45.70, sanitary sewer, $59.97. Moving into the 2024 draft capital budget presentation. This is a listing of the items referred to the budget process. The status has been noted to the right. The capital ranking guidelines, council priority established by council, and most all the other projects are critical and high provided by staff. Other factors that have been considered in ranking is health and safety, being referred to the budget, stewardship, grant funding, and other sources like DCCs and non-refundable deposits. We generally include placeholder budgets. These are important to ensure we have budget authority if council-approved opportunities arise. Expenditures not in the budget bylaw are not lawful expenditures. The major sources of capital funding are reserves and DCCs. Our current balances total 90 million. This does not contemplate any amounts to be received in 2024. As noted, there is borrowing MFA debt which has not yet been received, but will replenish these balances as well as the general receipts during the year from DCCs and CACs. The transfers to reserves and contribution to capital in the 2024 budget, these are not reflected in the previous slide. These include what is already in the base plus what is being proposed in this draft budget. This shows a graph of the DC development cost charge receipts by category as at September 30th, which is approximately 30 million of what we have received. This slide shows the current and in progress debt. The grand total of the current MFA debt is 161.8 million. The non-MFA current external debt is 6.3 million. The new debt in progress is 176 million. The total current and in progress debt, external debt, is 344 million. This slide illustrates we have borrowing room available. Allowable debt is based on a debt servicing level of 25% of annual revenues. Debt limits are dependent upon current borrowing rates. The following is a list of the capital carry forwards by division. These were taken at a point in time and they reflect the budget minus what was actually spent at that time. So at the time it was taken is 212.5 million. Previous year was 235.6 million. So the following are slides from each of the different areas. If it has been funded, there will be a funding source specified. If not, like most of them, they will be unfunded and require further council input before they are funded. So arts, culture, community initiatives, which has been funded from the library reserve, $59,798. Airport unfunded projects in the amount of $850,000. Community development unfunded projects in the amount of $277,000. Facilities has projects funded in the amount of 71.5 million and unfunded in the amount of 134.24 million. Fire has projects funded from prior year surplus in the amount of 140,500. And from the fire equipment replacement reserve of 929,766. They do have a project of 3.21 million unfunded. Fleet has unfunded requests in the amount of 3.453 million. Information technology, unfunded projects in the amount of 2.363 million. Parks also has unfunded projects in the amount of 10 million. Police capital projects have been funded from the RCMP reserve in the amount of 145,000. Recreation shows unfunded projects of 320,000. Sewer has 2.178 million funded from their capital works reserve and unfunded in the amount of 2.18 million. Solid waste has projects in the amount of 550,000 funded from the solid waste equipment reserve. Stormwater has some funded projects from DCC's 235,620, from capital projects reserve 400,000, debt funded 4.514 million, and unfunded projects in the amount of 24.225 million. Transportation has unfunded amounts of 37.797 million. The rest of the 70.734 million has been funded. Water has unfunded projects in the amount of 11.396 million. They have funding from the capital works reserve in the amount of 2.13 million and from DCC's of 495,000. This brings us back to our draft budget timeline for our next steps.
Great, can you go back and leave that, just leave that on the screen and for other members of council to come back to that. Councilor Ferguson.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just housekeeping. I guess your methodology or staff's methodology today was just to go through this or go through it line by line. I'm just wondering what the status of today or what your thinking was, if I may. That's my first question.
Yeah, Ms. Ruff?
So if there's any questions, we'd like to answer those questions now. I think that this is our best opportunity to spend some time with it, if we have a little more time.
Okay, so the housekeeping question was if there's 70 pages and I have a question on 1, 2, and 3, am I going to best to take notes or something? That's the new format, take notes and then ask several questions later?
We can take those questions now, and we can flip back to the schedules if you prefer.
So I was wondering, here's what I would think and I would do. I've written some notes. If I've got some questions, I can write them down and either email staff or go from there rather than
I
ask
think we've
them
got time.
orally.
We've got time here on the agenda today to discuss the budget, Councilor Ferguson. Right now, it's a draft budget. Is that correct? And I believe if we can discuss and optimize changes, we can also make changes at first, second, and third.
Okay, so I'll start with the first
Yeah,
segment.
just go ahead. Yeah, if you've got questions,
if you're going to put together a 5-year budget, would we see the last few years what the percentages were, police, fire, the big ones? And also you talked an awful lot about unfunded, how much were unfunded, and how the, the CFWD or CCFWDD works, and how we fund things that are necessary that aren't funded. And so I have a number of questions on that, and including if the RCMP or other, I guess they're the other only organization I can think of, other than the region, but we deal with the region. If the RCMP wants to add things or send us invoices, is there an audit system for anything regarding their contracts or their services or otherwise? Are we able to?
Well, let's try to do one at a time. So on the capital side, Ms. Ruff, I believe we're replicating the process from last year, which is that items can be funded either early next year or throughout the year using budget envelopes. That's the process we've had in 2023. I believe you're anticipating continuing with that in 2024?
We had provided some estimates of funding sources because there's specific funding sources like library reserve. Other than that, we would be going through the same process. We'll have budget envelopes when we bring the capital budget bylaw forward, and we'll use those during the year after council has approved those projects.
So the items could certainly be added to the funding envelope if you have a source, Councillor Ferguson.
I'm going to let other folks ask, and then I'll line up my questions. I actually thought I saw some differences on your slides as to what was in our package as well. And I will look those up and let you know later.
But maybe you can go back to the RCMP slide as well, since Councillor Ferguson had some questions about that. I also have a series of questions about that slide. So on that slide, is there an audit process for some of these requests that are itemized here?
Not from our perspective. They provide us with their estimated costs. Our RCMP work with them to determine, in this case, some extra vehicle needs, et cetera. We provide them with the number of officers that we would like to add during the year. And beyond that, they do send us a detailed breakdown of what the expenses are, but there's not particularly an audit process from our side.
How about very, very specifically, before, and my last question I asked before, Elizabeth, what about if they got a contract, if we have a staff contract with fire or QP people, we sit down with them and they try to work something out with a beneficial contract to the public end. Are we able to do that with the RCMP?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, on this one, E-Division Administration, the increase of 24%, did they provide a rationale for that?
We're talking about indirect or direct?
So you're talking about the indirect costs for
No, second to
overheads?
last paragraph.
Right, so that one is that's an increase, I believe, in leaves.
Yes.
There's a lot more leave costs, medical leave costs associated. And our understanding is that there's fewer numbers of members, so that's on a per member basis as increasing.
So it's not related to the transition underway within the city of Surrey, because I believe Mayor Locke has been suggesting that in the future or currently we'd be responsible for a higher percentage of these costs if there's a large reduction in our CMP membership within the region. Have you heard about this yet?
I'm assuming that if we have a large reduction in members, we'd have a larger overhead cost.
Yeah,
because
so
of
it'll
the
fall to the other
members.
municipalities to make up the difference. That's what she has represented and is still looking to get that confirmed at some point. Yeah. Councillor Richter?
Okay, so, first of all, I want to just thank Councillor Martins very much for her idea of having a council roundtable. I certainly support that. I don't think getting a document like this today with, as it says on slide 65, we're going to give a financial plan bylaw for second and third reading. I think we need to talk about this a bit more before we give it third reading. I want to go backtrack through these slides. So all the slides that have unfunded projects, if we give first, second, and third on December 18th, does that mean all those projects remain unfunded?
Correct.
Correct,
They
okay.
would be funded through the process similar to prior years.
Okay.
prior year.
Now, slide 46, you've got a balance of debt of $344 million. What was the total debt in 2018?
I do not know.
Okay, could I please get that, could council please get that number? I want to know, 2018 was the
2018?
start point for debt. Where are we with debt right now? Okay, going back to slide 43 and 44, you've got DCCs listed there on 43 and reserves, and you've also got a slide 44, which says this was not in the previous slide. So question number one is, why is 22.5 million not in the previous slide? And question number 2 on slide 43, what was the 2018 levels for reserves and DCCs?
We'd
And you
have to get back
probably
to you.
don't have that number, you'll have to get back to me, right?
The reason this slide 44 is not included in the previous slide is that's the estimated the slide 43 is the estimated balances at the end of 2023. This is the amount that is contemplated in the 2024 budget to be added.
Okay, but I still want to know what the balances were in 2018, being the start year. Slide number 28. Let me just backtrack to slide number 28. Mayor operating contingency of $100,000. What is that? What is it for? And is this new? Normally, we have a council contingency, but what is a mayor contingency?
So mayor operating contingency is new, and that would be at the discretion of the mayor with some parameters to use those funds, no different than council has a contingency,
Okay,
which is in
so
base.
why would this council give the mayor discretionary funds of $100,000? Is this a normal practice with other communities?
I can't answer whether it's a normal practice with other communities, and I think this would be up to council.
Okay, well, I'm flagging that one right now. Slide number 27. So I just want to make sure that what we've been presented today, and we're going to be asked to pass a resolution to move it forward to the financial plan bylaw on December 18th, is a tax increase of 7.59%. Is that correct? Correct, 7.59%. Okay, and going back to the slide number 20, I note that the IAFF contract expired in 2021. Now, what does that mean for 2024? What is the status of the IAFF negotiations, and what kind of anticipated increases are going to be coming through because we're adding a significant number of new IAFF members?
I can't comment on the status of negotiations, but we do include a provision for what we believe would be a reasonable increase based on other municipalities for that intervening period.
Okay, but do we have a total number for how this is going to impact us? And will it impact us in 2024?
It's included in the budget as it is presented, assuming that they settle for rates similar to the region.
Okay. So this is another reason why I think Councillor Martins is absolutely right. We need to have a council roundtable, and it's clear to me that a part of that roundtable will probably have to be enclosed because of salary negotiations. So thank you very much for your work on this. I'm just going to say right now, I am not prepared to accept a 7.59% tax increase for 2024, and I will not be supporting in favor of this resolution today.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for all the work that went into the presentation and the draft budget so far. First question, just in regards to the regional charges, specifically on water and sewer. You've itemized a pretty significant increase over the next number of years, each year.
Can you just go back to that slide?
For
Thanks.
both of those regional uses. It might not be a fair question, but beyond 2028, are we anticipating any kind of stabilization in these increases? Or are we looking at perpetual Metro Vancouver increases on both of the probably most important services we deliver?
Yeah, I can answer that. So the Mayor Harvey, recently re-elected as chair, does have a financial plan task force that is standing. And when he formed that at the beginning of this council term, he was very insistent on seeing those long-term chronic 15% come down. And that task force achieved that, but it was unable to do that for the first 2 years, given a number of commitments by the previous board. And Metro Vancouver is currently projecting 5 and 5 in years 3 and 4 of this term, if the Metro Vancouver DCC bylaw is approved by the province.
Okay.
Okay, so they are working on bringing those numbers down, just as you've highlighted. The number of the board members felt that those were not sustainable increases, and that's been addressed through the DCC program.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification on that. Yeah, because it is concerning, just obviously with something out of our control, and a lot of what we're looking at in terms of percentage increase in this tax rate, based on reading what I can, seems to be sort of out of our control. And so that obviously is a challenge. Going to the solid waste projected operations, I am curious, you mentioned Sierra Waste contract being the reason for the $789,000 increase there. Can we get some explanation as to, was that a new contract that we signed? Was it a renewal? Was it due to inflationary pressures? What's the reason why we're seeing an almost $800,000 increase in that contract?
So my understanding is that there's some inflationary pressures that built up because we were in a contract. So now we're reflecting some of that lag we had in inflationary costs from prior year being brought forward into the current year.
And again, it might not be a fair question to yourselves, but are other municipalities seeing the same kind of increases on their solid waste? And if they is everybody using the same provider? Are we using different providers? Do some people do it in-house? Are we all doing it outsourcing it? If we can maybe get, if we go into some kind of workshop or if we have discussions before the 18th, we'd be really interested to see what other municipalities are dealing with on that front.
I don't think I have any clarity into that. I know there are many providers out there.
Okay.
So.
I appreciate it. Yeah, because that's obviously on the 10.32% increase, the main driver. So I'm curious what we can do, if anything, there. I was pretty pleased to see the average actual strength of our CMP members going up. That's really nice to see. On page 26 or slide 26, the discretionary budget requests. I am curious, and maybe again, this is an issue for when we go to a workshop, maybe we can get some insight into this. The paving line item that results in a 0.5% increase. Curious if we can get a breakdown of what paving is, which projects were those council directed or not. And then with the rain gardens, I am curious, I remember a motion coming to the council table a little earlier in regards to requests for the township to actually step in and maintain and operate more of these rain gardens that are built. I'm curious if that's this, or if this is an additional line item. So was this us taking over rain gardens?
Yeah, so I'll deal with that. So the paving question, let's start there, Ms. Ruff. This is in addition to the base paving budget, I believe, of around 4.8 or 4.7. I have to go back and look it up, somewhere around that. This would increase it closer to the high fives. Is that correct? I think that's roughly what it would do. But you've expressed that paving can be difficult to nail down as a single line item within the budget itself because many different cost drivers. Maybe you could just give a brief explanation on paving and where you're seeing the requests come from engineering for that.
So, obviously paving, we have a large municipality and paving is everywhere. So some of it's internal, some of it's external contracts. So there's many factors that go into it. But I think there's been a lot of pressure to get some of the paving improved on some of the roads. So this is reflective of that.
And the selection of which roads are paved is based on a rating system of the most critical need, and that's handled by senior management.
And is this an envelope that we're sort of giving discretion to staff to come forward with and suggest those highest ranked projects?
So they don't come forward in the operating budget. It's an operating item, so it's handled as operating. It doesn't come back to council to approve which roads go in which order. But if you have some specific roads that you think are worthy of consideration, they could be specifically funded.
Okay.
And then the rain garden, if you recall, that goes back to last term. This council brought that back and directed staff to assume maintenance of those because strata corporations were not maintaining them. That was the concern. That was identified as an additional operating, I believe, of this amount, Ms. Ruff, plus a one-time capital ask of around $600,000, which I believe you have presented here as a one-time, not within the capital budget. Is that correct? So there's a component here where it's being permanently added to the operating budget for the amount requested as per that report to council, but there's a one-time to provide some catch-up maintenance funding.
Let them respond before I go on.
So this could be removed if council wishes to change direction.
Yeah, the 250,000 is in capital.
Is it in capital, not a one-time? Is it, it's funded from which source?
From capital projects.
Capital Projects Reserve, so it's a one-time catch-up. The request was 600, and I believe you've included that. So more could be added in this budget, or it could be added in future years.
Okay, thank you. Second last one, page 32 to 33, it's the average household and average condominium. I am just curious, maybe as an item for future budget presentations, just to confirm, to determine the difference between 2023 and 2024, you'd be adding all rows on the left-hand column of 2023 to determine what the total cost was to a household and compare that to the bottom right square on this table. Is that correct?
Correct. In addition, households will have the metro charges and school tax, et cetera, which causes some confusion.
This is the
our
township specifically.
controllable
Okay.
costs.
So you add up whole left side
Yes.
column and compare that to the bottom right side square, and that's your difference, whatever the difference is there. Okay, great. And then the last question I would have is, and actually I think maybe Councillor Richter might have addressed it. So on page 43, we have the $35 million in receipts, and then the $22.5 million on the following page is what you're projecting for next year to receive and put into each of these. Is that correct?
Correct. In addition, there would be DCC receipts.
Right.
And any CAC receipts that would go into those reserves.
And so transfers to reserve and CTC, you're talking about internal
Internal transfers.
Yeah,
transfers.
so
Okay.
just to clarify, Ms. Ruff, this is CTCs within the base operating budget, not the addition or the change. This is showing council the holistic amount within the entire base budget, not a change. And so this would give a picture of what percentage of property tax revenue and utility revenue is being set aside for capital projects. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Or rainy days, I guess, in the sense of snow and ice.
Correct.
Correct. Or equipment ordering. So this would show council the amounts, and there may be target amounts that senior management would like, that feel that these amounts may need to become in the future, but this is where we stand today within the draft budget. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's it for me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, I had a question on slide number 15. It refers to ceasing groundwater extraction, and that staff is currently working on this. So my question would be, what is actually the impact, and is it just a study? Or if we cease groundwater extraction for the township or for Brookswood, and what would the impact of that be on if that's included in this year's budget, and what would be the impact of that, say, 5 years from now, if we're doing a 5-year plan?
Ms. Ruff? Maybe Mr. Zwag could answer that. Is that possible?
Thank you, through your worship. Related to this resolution is also the recent discussions with respect to utility rate reviews, other items. But specifically going back to groundwater, we, as pursuant to council direction, we have ceased permanently the groundwater production in Fort Langley, Murrayville, and Brookswood. We're currently in the process of abandoning and closing those wells off permanently. So that process has already started, and this additional Metro Vancouver water, which we now have to purchase, has been included in the budget and will continue to have to be purchased for in the future. Did that answer most of the questions?
So do we know what the status of that is? So it's obviously included in the budget, but we don't have an amount. Is that right?
So of the amount that we've increased in the water purchases, about 30% of it relates to increases in growth of purchases, and 70% relates to increases in the rates structure.
Okay, so, but, all right. And so in 5 years, will we know sort of the bigger picture? Is that what staff is currently working on, so to speak?
Thank you, your worship. Again, I don't have the number memorized, but the number that is in my memory from when we presented to council was in the order of magnitude of $1 to $2 million per year permanently that we have to buy from Metro Vancouver at those 2023 rates. As those rates continue to increase, that purchase amount will have to also increase accordingly with each budget year.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other.
Okay. Councillor Bartons?
Thank you. And thank you for all your hard work on this and the hours to put this all together, and thank you for being here today to present it. So I do have some questions. I'm finding this a bit difficult that I'm being given this package and that I'm supposed to make one big decision, yay or nay, rather than having a workshop format to go through it and discuss it and maybe consider what are priorities. But I'll go through first of my questions on things here. This may be something that is for special closed. Page 18, talking about the cost categories for 2024. The first line, salaries and wages. Now I appreciate that that's going to be a big expense, and I do understand that the QP negotiations has an impact on the expense. But I feel there's not a lot of information there about what the different categories of employees, if you will, like whether they're exempt or covered under the union, and how this number compares to previous years. Are our costs higher with regards to salaries, or have they come down? So I would like to do a bit more exploration on this one. I understand that some people who have really served us well for years and years and years have moved on to other positions. So I'm just trying to see if that's made a change to the salary numbers. So I'm mindful that we're in a regular meeting though, and I don't know how much of this conversation should happen here, but that is something I would like more information about. And then, so that is page, 18. And then I just want to go to page 26. So here we've got a list of discretionary budget requests. And I'm just trying to figure out how these made the list and how these were prioritized when I'm looking at all the different categories and needs of critical projects that are all unfunded, not all of them are unfunded. And I'm wondering how we decided that these things need to be included in the budget, and the other ones we have to go through a process of getting them added, one-offs. What was the source of these items in this list?
So just to clarify, when we talk about items that are unfunded, those are capital, right? So these are the operating items that would go into the base budget. So again, to fund the capital would be some of these transfers to reserves that would then provide funding for those unfunded projects. Most of these came out of either a staff request or a council referral to the budget process.
Okay. So for the first one, enhanced community events, that's $306,000. That's a pretty big expense. And I heard there was a couple of events that were mentioned, a concert series, a couple things like that. What is this money covering? Like, I'm not understanding. It's a pretty significant, just when I'm looking at critical things and why this became a priority and made this list.
So I believe council had some discussion about enhancing community events. So some of this would be contract labor, some would be internal labor and some would be event costs to enhance some of the, I believe I'm trying to think of the list, Canada Day, some summer nights concerts, can't remember what else came up in that list. But
So if I'm correct, Ms. Ruff, what could happen is council, I think, has expressed a number of commentaries around potentially enhancing events throughout the community. So you do your best to sort of take direction, and then this is discretionary. This is why it's listed as discretionary operating addition. Council can reduce it, remove it, and then it could be added into the base budget within this category, presumably within Parks and Recreation, and then council could determine how it's expended. It could either be in-house, external, any number of options, which are unrelated to keeping it within or removing it from the operating budget. And again, not to confuse it with how the capital budget operates. Is that correct?
correct.
Yes, yeah.
Again, discretionary allows us to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what you're saying. But I'm confused by this. You mentioned council. Was there, maybe this is a question from Mr. Backen, but was there a council directive to do this? Like, how did we land on 306,000? Where did this come from?
Mr. Bracken, do you have any input?
As I recall, there was some discussions at the council table about the need to enhance the community events. That suggestion was looked at in the context of the budget itself in terms of what could be considered and what would fit within a still very ambitious envelope. And that led us to some of the items you're seeing here, which is both the enhanced community events and the enhanced community events walkable lights. The balance, so there's a few rounding matters there, but these are things that staff have either been directed by resolution or understood from the council discussions that should be at least presented to council as discretionary items so the council could determine if we're on the right path or if there should be another direction taken.
Thank you. And then my next question on the same slide, there's a reduction of community grants of $100,000. And maybe you could speak more to that and where that came from, how that came to be? Because it seems like we're increasing our funding for community, but then we're reducing it. What's going on there?
So, Ms. Ruff, I think the confusion there is the grants program versus potentially a line item within Arts and Recreation. Maybe you could highlight the confusion there.
So the grants, we looked at the last, I believe, 5 years of the grants program, and we've had funding remaining at the end of it consistently for those years. So when we're looking at areas to make reductions and maybe redeploy those funds, that was
Thank you.
suggested.
Thank you, and I'm not confused. I'm trying to look at why we're taking away and adding to, and they both have the word community in them. So, to your point, so for 2023 or the last round of community grants, how much was left?
Back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, alrighty, and then page 28. I think this question's already been asked. There's a mayor operating contingency that's been added. It's a new one-time. I just want to clarify, we still have a council contingency? Okay.
Correct. That's in the base budget.
Yeah, and what is the amount that we have for council contingency?
150,000.
150? Okay, thank you. Okay, and yeah, I guess the only other thing I would say is I find it a bit difficult that it's an all or nothing approach, and this is our first kick at it without actually having conversations as a council and determining what our priorities are as a group. I'm not opposed to anything I'm seeing here, but I think it's important to work collaboratively on something a decision that has an impact on every household in the township, the bottom line and how we spend their money. So I would like to make a motion, if I may, at some point after all the questions have been asked. I'd like to look at referring this to, I guess it would be the CPC, so that we can have further conversations. But I'll leave that till the questions
We
are
have
done.
other first-time speakers, yeah. Councillor Bailey.
I could get you to go to page 28, please. And I see new one-times, and the first 5 are all fire. So that means these programs are not in existence right now? Or not being funded?
Correct. There's a move by the new fire chief to set up a training program, and so this is the start of that. It's a multi-year.
So we've got 2 high-rises currently, over 20 stories, and we have no high-angle ability, training, anything? That's the first 2?
The first one says to provide necessary instruction equipment for 18 Township of Langley Fire Department career firefighters to be trained and certified to the National Fire Protection Agency.
So that means currently we have none, correct?
Sorry, I don't think I can answer that specifically.
Kind of important because we've got construction going on over 20 stories high and no ability whatsoever when it's mandated by WCB that we have it. So then I look at, I'll skip past number 3 and number 4. Number 5, CISM Peer Support Training Fire. Is that a new program?
I believe that's part of the new training programs that are being set up.
It should have been instituted about 25 years ago, I might add, or 30. One of the fastest growing fields in emergency services right now is PTSD. And that's exactly what this is, and we don't have it in place. So I now turn to page 31, and I see that out of 21 communities, we are second from the bottom. That might explain why these 5 are coming forward, and a lot of other ones, that we're playing some really hard catch-up right now, and it's costing this council an awful lot of money because it wasn't dealt with in the past. So I'm looking at these numbers, and I've got to say, I go along with Councillor Martins. I'm not real familiar with doing this and dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, so I would really appreciate being able to sit down and hack through some of these numbers because some of them are shocking. When I see fields that I'm familiar with that have been completely not dealt with, and it's costing us right now, I got a funny feeling that there's an awful lot more that's going on now that we're playing some real hard catch-up. Thank you. Thanks for your work, you guys.
Councillor Rampopta?
Yeah, just 2 items. Under the unfunded fleet page, I forgot to write down the page number there. There was a listing of bylaw vehicles. It was quite high. I can't, what page was it? Or it might have been on a different page. Sorry, I didn't write it down. There was a listing of fleet vehicles required for bylaw, but then under staffing, when we were hiring bylaws, it said it included fleet. So I'm just, if you could clarify that piece.
For the rental costs, the 72.
So, okay, so these are previous ones, correct? So when we added the current year bylaw officers, we assume that we're going to have to lease vehicles for them.
Okay.
So it's part year. In this case, we've got some previous ones that needed to be funded.
And then how many fleet vehicles are we requesting to purchase under the unfunded? Or is that just replacement?
It's replacement of current fleet vehicles, and it's done based on the age
And the
mileage,
lease
et
and
cetera.
stuff like that? I assume that they're all leased or not purchased.
We have a mix.
Okay. Page 26. So there's the line item as previously requested to add 150,000 to transfer into a snow and ice reserve. And then I also see another item of 642,000 also dedicated to snow and ice. 358,000 of which is salaries. Can you define what those salaries are? How many positions? And if they're full-time and permanent?
Four OMWs.
Sorry, those are 4 staff, and they are full-time, I believe.
Yeah.
And so that is to implement that sidewalk program that we acquired equipment for at the beginning of the year. And the other one, the transfer to snow and ice reserve, is for our general snow clearing and ice on roads.
Okay, so we've got 4 full-time people going to snow and ice control on sidewalks for full-time, permanent full-time?
Correct.
How many days a year do we have snow that would require full-time 365-day employment?
I believe the report had some other uses for those staff during the year, which was, maybe Mr. Zweig could comment.
Thank you, to your worship. The snow and ice control sidewalk program consists of 7 total crews once fully implemented. As part of this year's processes, we established 2 crews, and then as part of the multi-phase request for 24-25 is 2 additional 2 crews, so 4 people per year. So once implemented, 7 crews will be working on snow and ice control for sidewalk. As indicated, when it's not snowing, they'll be working on other programs like community cleanliness, sidewalk repairs, etc., reducing the total need or overall need of our seasonal, or commonly known as our temporary full-time employees that we need during the year.
So how is that shown in the budget that we're reducing our seasonal budget? I just want to make sure that it
There
doesn't.
are some efficiencies that we've reflected in this.
Okay.
Whether they're one for one with this program, I'm not entirely sure, but there are some efficiencies that we've reflected in.
Okay, so we're going to be reducing our seasonal temporary hires and then substituting it into four permanent. Okay, that's all I had.
I believe, Ms. Ruff, this includes a second tranche in the next year as well as part of your financial plan. So in total, what is this snow and ice control sidewalk program now costing taxpayers? Do you know?
1.12 million.
1.12 million. Okay, and that's spread over 2 budgets as part of this proposal. So if council felt uncomfortable with the 7.5, this would be one item that could potentially be very obviously removed or deferred further. Yeah. So Councillor Martins, you had a motion. Go ahead.
Yeah, is everyone's done with their initial questions?
No other speakers, yeah.
Yeah, okay, well then, because we were, the very last slide, there was a motion.
It has not been moved and seconded, so if you wish to, I think you expressed a desire to refer the draft budget.
Yeah, so my question being, I don't know if I need to separate this out, because the first part is about receiving.
Yeah, we could certainly receive it
And
and
then-
then refer it, or you could refer the second one if you have a preference. So if you wish to move the first one, you could certainly do that, or I can do that.
Well, the second one is speaking to the 5-year financial plan, so,
It's directing staff to prepare the bylaw, which council may not be ready to ask them to do, but we could certainly receive the first one. So I'll move the first paragraph. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Call the question on the first paragraph, which is receipt. That carries unanimously. Go ahead. So you could move the second one, or if you wish to refer the draft budget, you could do that.
thank you. Yeah, I will move that we refer this draft budget to CPC for further discussion with
Is there a
councillors.
seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Kuntz. Yeah, so go ahead.
I think I've already spoken to it. I just feel that this is too big of a decision to just go for it without having further conversations as council. There was questions here that you did a very good job answering. You were put on the hot seat, but there also were some that you weren't able to, because I understand that there was a lot of information requested here. So I think that also gives opportunity for staff to come back with some of the information so we can further vet it.
Councillor Van Popta?
Yeah, through your worship to staff. I don't recall us going to any type of workshop or anything last year. Can we clarify the process that we used last year that seemed to be okay?
Ms. Ruff? I believe this is pretty similar to last year.
It is very similar to
Yeah.
last year.
There's no issues last year, I understand, yeah. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, well, I just want to make a comment that in previous years, council does have discussions around budget relative to council priorities in particular. So I am very much in favor of Councillor Martin's motion to send this to CPC for additional discussion. If this motion fails, then I would like to flag the tax increase, the mayor's contingency fund, and the debt and reserve DCC levels for further detail. And I don't know how we're going to get that if we don't have a workshop, but
Yeah,
I'd
no, I
like to
think we
flag.
could, I can speak to that. Do you have anything else?
No.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you. I think in the past, last year and perhaps other years as well, once we've made this receipt, which we've done already, we're looking at the next one, of course, during the preparation stages, if you looked at the list of dates, there, if I may, through the chair to staff, there's an opportunity for us to discuss parts of the budget, get questions answered as we proceed through the budget process. Is that not correct, if I may, through the chair?
There are further meetings where the budget would come forward as a bylaw, which can still be changed. We have to also go for public input, so there is some time.
And what I recall, if I may, through the chair, is last year, I think we made, and as other years as well, we make changes at the bylaw stages as we proceed. We ask you questions,
correct.
we get more information, get supplemental, and we also get other issues and items that come forward, which we address accordingly. Is that correct as well?
Correct, we had a late change last year.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councillor Martins?
Thank you. So I'm mindful of staff time, and staff are working extremely hard in this building and the other buildings. And I don't like asking staff to go away and prepare something if we haven't actually sorted out as an elected body what it is we want prepared. And that is why I would rather do it at this stage in the game before staff put more time and energy into it. That's the only reason for requesting it now.
Yeah, so, Councillor Bailey, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if a CPC would help me. What I'm wondering is if the ones of us who have interests to sit down with people in finance and just go through this stuff, because this is a pretty new process to me, and I don't even know when you can change things in that. And you know, having gone through only one or two CPCs, I don't, that's not what I'm looking at, being able to sit down in a room and be able to just ask questions, is, you know, like a workshop or something that's a lot less formalized than a CPC. Also, I would have to chair that thing, and I dread doing that. You know, haven't seen, had one workshop on that thing over there, and I just go, oh, Jesus. So I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to sit down with some financial people and just ask questions informally, maybe draw something on the whiteboard. You know, I'm kind of visual, and if you put arrows and crosses and that, I follow it a lot easier. You know, if there's a process like that that would be available at some times where I could just kind of grind through this thing and see if I can understand it a little better.
We can always answer specific questions. We can address specific questions or meet with people as required.
You know, a lot of times with me, a question leads to another question, and you've experienced me for a year now, and you know I can just ask really stupid stuff sometimes, right?
Thanks. Oh, Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm concerned about all of council, there's 9 of us, having individual meetings with staff. I think it would be an unfair drain on their time to have to deal with 9 of us individually when collectively it's the group that makes a decision. So I wonder if we could perhaps change the motion to say CPC workshop, with the intent being that would be a Q&A session primarily.
CPC, it has that format, as you know, being a committee of the whole, there's an unlimited speaking opportunity and attempts to make a referral back to council. So it would have that style of a meeting. So I don't see how we can change the motion, but if you wish to make an amendment to the referral.
No, I don't want to amend the referral. I think the intent of the referral is a good one, which is we need to sit down and talk about this more, a lot more.
Okay, understand. So the challenge, Mr. Ruff, I think is the idea was this is a draft budget. If this referral fails, we could move you to direct the plan and then amend the draft to give you some direction if council want. We were here today to do it. The other option too would be to defer the draft budget for further discussion, potentially on the 18th. And then you would prepare the bylaw for the first meeting in January. That would delay the process by approximately 1 month, I understand. That would contradict sort of the council budget policy that where we've been trying to get the budget completed for SMT, I believe, earlier in the calendar year, such that they know their funding, know the programs, know the direction much earlier than what we've typically seen recently in the last 5 years, that's not concluded until April or May. Maybe you could mention that or outline that.
Yeah, I think it gives staff, the earlier we can do it in the year gives staff clarity on what their spending envelopes are and what programs they can undertake, especially those which are discretionary type of spending envelopes.
And then with the draft budget for operating, the way we've done capital in 2023 is that we've identified the funding available by finalizing the operating budget. And then throughout the year, we could come forward with a set of discussions around capital, which could be separated out from operating. And if the operating is at third, proceeding towards final, you would have you would know, finance could report the pool of capital funding that's available within the 2024 calendar for council to fund. Because quick math that I've done, there's about $30 to $35 million in projects that are quality and looking for funding, with maybe a half or a third of that available within operating. Would that sound about right? That would be the challenge that this council would have. That could be a separate discussion. How do you have that discussion if you don't know what operating funding there is?
Correct. Capital projects can get delayed if we haven't completed the operating
Yeah,
budgets.
so I think a deferral, maybe to the 18th, if some members of council want to digest the budget, and also can amend it at third reading. So I'm not seeing where the discussion can occur at the council table, so I don't support the referral. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, sorry, I'm probably gave the wrong impression. I'm not saying all 9 of us sit down one at a time. Sorry. What I'm saying is if you give us a time and a date where whoever wants to come and show up, I realize experienced councillors are a lot more familiar with this process than some of us are. Just if we could, whoever wants to or can attend, could just come and sit down with you one kick at it to just ask some clarification questions, okay? Very informally.
That makes sense. Call the question on the referral. And the referral fails. Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Van Popte, Councillor Pratt, Councillor Ferguson opposed. So now back to this. I'm going to move the second paragraph. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rent. So this would be the appropriate time. And Councillor Richter, you mentioned some. If there's any amendments that you'd like to see council adjudicate, that could also be done when the bylaw comes back on the 18th if this motion is successful.
Okay, so you're pushing this through. We're not going to defer it. Your intent is to put this on now, and if we want to change it, change it. Okay, if that's the case, then I move to delete the mayor's contingency fund of $100,000.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Kunst. You wish to discuss that, Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I've never heard of a mayor's contingency fund. Did council direct staff to put a mayor's contingency fund into this budget? Like, how did staff decide to put a contingency fund for the mayor in here?
Mr. Bracken?
It's a slush fund.
Is your corporate contingency a slush fund, Mr. Bracken?
Depends who you talk to, Your
Depends
Worship.
who you talk to, worship, yes. Go ahead, Mr. Bracken.
Your Worship, I think the challenge is that in the past, we've had corporate contingency, capital contingency, and on occasion, that's even been exhausted. So I think this is kind of a grassroots attempt to provide council and the mayor with some ability to deal with things that may arise, such as unforeseen willingness to fund or assist events or community projects or initiatives. I think that's its derivation. So the intent is there. How the matter is perceived as something that's of concern. Also, I guess the administration of it's something the council may have to advise us at a later date in terms of what that
Okay,
would
but
look like.
Mr. Backen, where did the idea come from? Were staff told by the mayor to put this in?
No, I don't believe it came directly through that process. I think it was from some of the discussions we've had globally trying to meet the needs of council. I think our attempt is trying to pick the pieces up
So
on it.
why wouldn't staff have said, okay, we need another 100,000 in contingency and just bump council contingency up from 150 to 250?
Councillor Richter, if you could let Mr. Bracken answer the questions before you interrupt him, that'd be preferable. Mr. Bracken, do you have anything else to add?
Just to finish the thought, Your Worship, as I understand the sensitivity, it is possible to add to other areas, but as we've seen with this council, which is different from previous councils, there's a need to move quickly and adapt very quickly to circumstance. It was not intended to, I guess, be controversial. It was simply intended to provide another means for council to consider. And in that regard, the motion and discussion in regards to the contingency is completely appropriate.
Yeah, I'd agree, and if it's here and if council doesn't wish to grant it, then it can be removed. Yeah. Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, excuse me, I'm not done with
I
this one yet.
thought you were finished. Go ahead, Councillor
No,
Richter.
I still don't understand why the mayor would have discretion to decide on their own what this $100,000 is going to be spent on. This is highly irregular. And there was no evidence that staff gave that this is a common practice amongst other municipalities.
Okay.
No, it's not okay. It's in the budget for $100,000.
Yeah,
Why?
And council can remove it if it so desires, Councilor Richter.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't think it should be there.
No, I think we caught that. Councilor Ferguson, go ahead.
You just about lost my thought. When the light went on, I was thinking, if I may, first question, the mayor's contingency, if I may, through the chair staff, was that not in last year as well, if I may?
I believe it was, but
Through the chair to staff, please, Mr. Chair.
go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. There was actually reference and discussion made as to the mayor's contingency last year. That's correct. I think, however, through the debate, through the budget process and some of the debates, that was then shifted to be something else. The question was asked in terms of our firsthand knowledge of other communities. It's limited our knowledge, but there are communities, for certain larger communities, that have this associated with the mayor's office, Vancouver and Surrey being examples, but we don't have an exhaustive list of what other communities are doing.
And nor would I expect you to exhaust it. Another one, and I don't want to ask a loaded question, but we also have that for administrative staff. We have some sort of a contingency fund as well. Is that not correct?
We have a corporate operating contingency and a corporate capital contingency, yes.
That's right. So we have those as well. And I think they're part of the base budget.
And Councilor Ferguson, Mayor Stewart was heavily criticized, I believe last term, for a mayor's office operating budget in excess of $1 million. So I don't think this is, an unreasonable thing for council to consider.
That's probably not why they call him King Richard, is it? But anyway, it's just I wanted to know, I wanted to make some comments, as I do every year at budget time. You know, if you look at the impact on page 31, that Langley is second from the bottom. You know, these numbers are right now, I'm sure.
Go back to that slide, Ms. Rowe.
31.
Yeah.
I'm sure that even these numbers will change with our neighbors within the region. I'm sure Surrey will come up with something big. I think North Vancouver and both the city and the district are going to have challenges with a number of their projects. Everything is getting more and more, as another council member said, about the utilities, both the sewer and water. The cost of providing the services, the major capital projects gone. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. As we talked about, and I think we'll talk about it more, RCMP and as Councillor Bailey has indicated, fire. It's a challenge now for any community to hold back on important things that we need to proceed with. You could cut an awful lot of things and have a less of a tax increase, but you would not deliver the type of services nor provide the need that this community asked for. I only wish I had a magic wand and would make things easier. It's not going to be easier, and Langley is not alone. And so no matter what we say today, we're not alone in our tax. I think increases will be probably lower, and I can't predict what my colleagues are going to do in the region, but I really believe that we're going to be caught with probably towards the end of to the lower part percentages for tax increases for the region. But I know it's difficult for us this time of year, but it's always difficult time that I go through the impact on every particular household. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Bailey?
While I appreciate fiscal reserved approaches, you know, I look at, there's 21 communities here on this thing. We are, the fifth or sixth largest. And as I mentioned last time, I think we're playing some very, very hard catch-up. And it could be because we are sitting down at number 20. And because in the past, people have deferred or, you know, there's a saying that I always disliked in emergency services, and that's let's roll the dice. We'll roll the dice on this one to see if it's going to just so it won't happen this year. What are the odds of it happening this year? And right now we're playing catch up. We're number 20, where we should be probably in the range of about number 5 or 6, and that is an impact. I'm looking at. You know, I don't want to see my taxes go up almost 8%, but there are times when you have to pay the piper, and when you're talking about, we can move to Soyuz, you're looking at a 40% increase right now because of severe lack of maintenance of water and sewer. And I think that's what we're also doing, is playing catch up on severe lack of staying current and taking an easy road out. Let's have a low tax increase so that people at this table don't have to take a beating. Well, that's not why I took this job. I came here to do
Point of
stuff.
order, Mr.
Excuse
Mayor.
me.
He's not talking to the motion.
Yes,
that's
I
on the
am.
table. No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
The motion is to remove the mayor contingency.
Can councilors just interrupt? I've never once in over a year
Okay, no,
interrupted Councillor Richter.
Councillor Bailey,
Okay.
we'll take the point of order. I think you are in a roundabout way getting to generally the issue, but Councillor Richter, you had a point of order?
Yeah. What is the motion that's on the table right now? And the discussion of the last two speakers have not been to the motion.
All right, so we'll direct them to speak to the motion. Councillor Bailey, if you could restrict
Can
your
you
comments.
repeat the motion,
It
please?
is to delete the mayor's contingency from the one-time
Oh.
funded list.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can also get, we can dispose of this and then come back to the
Yeah, okay, I'll
the main
come back
motion.
later.
Yeah, come
Thank
back to
you.
the main motion, yeah. Councillor Richter, do you wish to speak to the removal of that item?
No, I don't think it should, I want it gone. It shouldn't be there. One person shouldn't have control over 100,000 of public monies.
Are you referring to me or Mr. Backen?
No, I'm referring to the mayor's contingency, so I assume that means you.
Okay, so when you say one person control over a contingency, you're not referring to Mr. Backen then?
Did I bring Mr. Backen's name into this? I have consistently and repeatedly said mayor's contingency.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Don't put words in my
I was
mouth.
just clarifying. I think we've exhausted the discussion here. I'm going to call the question on this removal. D1. That's defeated with Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Martins, Councillor Van Popta, Councillor Ferguson opposed. Is there any other amendments? Can you go back to the last slide there with showed the, because I think if there's some obvious discussion we can have around the discretionary items, we can also have those on the 18th, which would give everyone 2 weeks to really go over the budget. We can also make any obvious discussion or removals or adjustments now, if people are willing to do so. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'd like to move that the tax increase for 2024 be set at 3%.
Mr. Backen, I'm not sure that that's what would happen if this was accepted by the chair and then passed by council. I'm not sure how we do that without specific amendments to the budget. So, I think you'd have to be more specific of what you'd like to cut, Councillor Richter. Mr. Backen, is it?
Correct, Your Worship. Otherwise, staff would be faced with taking the direction, 3%, taking it back and making some adjustments based on that. And the adjustments will be made without the input or insight of council. That can be very challenging. So you're quite right. It's much more helpful to say limit at 3% and with the reductions to occur A, B, C, and D. Whatever
So I
it may be.
agree. So I'm going to rule that out of order, Councillor Richter.
I challenge the chair.
Okay, Ms. Bauer, would you like to walk us through that, please?
In this instance, you would either vote to sustain the chair, meaning you believe the chair's ruling is appropriate, or you would vote against the chair, meaning the chair's ruling was inaccurate.
So can you make it green, red, for mayor, against mayor? Maybe that would be better.
Green if you agree with the mayor that it isn't an appropriate out of order. Red if you disagree with the mayor saying it's his ruling was incorrect.
And I do not vote.
And you do not vote no.
That's correct. So everybody go ahead and Ms. Bauer will.
Yes. Yes,
That is exactly what Ms. Bauer just said. Yeah. Go ahead.
just once.
Call the question. There we go. Go ahead, everybody. Go ahead. Everybody's very eager to vote, apparently. So, Ms. Bauer, I'm not voting, but it won't let me complete the vote. I have to label it. What am I labeling this thing? D1 challenge. Ms. Bauer, what are the results?
The chair is sustained.
Great. Do you have any other amendments, Councilor Richter? Because if you wish to reduce the property tax increase, please present your ideas on how to do so.
That is the problem with this budget. There is not enough time or information for council to work through what could be reduced, what should be reduced. So I'm not even going to debate this anymore. I'm just going to vote no on it. It's
don't-
wrong.
I'm not really sure how that's your conclusion when it's coming forward in 2 weeks, going for public consultation, and would not be adjudicated in a final form until
Well, Merry
January.
Christmas from council to all of the community out there. Enjoy your 7.59% tax increase. What a nice gift.
Yeah, so I believe this is a draft budget, Councillor Richter, that.
No,
that
it's
just-
not. It's going, you're sending this for a budget bylaw to come forward on December 18th. Merry Christmas.
Well, I've got a number of potential ideas so the council can consider to reduce the amount, which I can present at the 18th when we have the bylaw in its issued form. That's been pretty normal in the past. So I don't, either you don't understand the process or you're.
No, do not insult my intelligence, Mr. Mayor. I don't insult yours.
Okay, I recall many insults, but okay, we'll carry on. Councillor Martins, go ahead.
Thank you. It's a question actually for the chair, just for clarification, if I may. Because you mentioned earlier, you used the word defer it to the next meeting. But what exactly were you meaning by saying deferring? Because we are proceeding with this. But I think you were deferring discussion to next meeting. I'm just trying to get some
So
clarification on what you meant in that comment, just so I understand what I'm voting on.
So the second paragraph here has been moved and seconded. It's on the floor. So a deferral motion, if you wish to leave the draft budget in draft form prior to preparation of the bylaw, that would extend the conversation for one more council meeting in a draft form before the bylaw is prepared. I believe the bylaw can come forward for first and second, third reading like many other bylaws, and it could be amended by council at that time to proceed to public consultation as amended. And to me, that's a perfectly reasonable process, which allows for 2 weeks for council to consider the budget, see it in a bylaw form, and make amendments on the 18th. I think I'll have a few to bring forward as well at that time on the 18th to give council some options on how to reduce that 7.5 if it wishes to do so, with specific amendments identifying specific solutions, not just saying, hey, make it 1% or something like that.
Thank you. So I think when I heard defer, I think it was talking about the conversation can continue on in the next meeting with some of the things.
So
that
we
come
could
up.
defer it in draft form, or we could have the conversation when we see it in a bylaw form, which I think would potentially be helpful as well to see it in a bylaw form. But if council disagrees, someone could move to defer the preparation of the financial plan bylaw here. Someone could move this deferred to the next meeting and the conversation could continue then. Then you wouldn't see the financial plan bylaw until January.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. And so my intention is not to slow down the process. I appreciate the conversation earlier about allowing our staff to know what their budgets are to work with for the year, and I don't want to unintentionally delay that process. So thank you. I was just looking for some clarification.
Okay, great. And so in my opinion, unless I'm gonna wait for other comments, but many times in prior years, the draft budget bylaw has gone for public consultation and then been brought down based upon public feedback. So this idea that it's a 7.5% Christmas present, I think is just a soundbite, not reality. Councillor Van Popte, go ahead.
Yeah, through your worship to Ms. Ruff, can you clarify what last year's draft proposed tax increase was versus what we settled on? I think it was in the 12%. It was significantly higher than what we settled on. I do remember that being my first experience and going, wow, and then going through the process. So there's lots of opportunity to bring this down, and I concur with the mayor that saying that this is set in stone, that we're proposing 7.6 is actually unfortunate for the soundbite that it's receiving.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say it's going to be coming up. The staff, thank you for your time and energy today. We appreciate it. And I think that you've always been available in case we ever have any questions. I've always appreciated that. I did want to say that as we proceed through this process between now and the final adoption, you know, it's interesting to know, what we're doing rather than what we could be cutting. And we've got wages coming for our QP staff. We've got wages and other things for protective services. We've got bylaw officers coming forward. We've got a bylaw division improving to the point where that's being requested by the public. I see roads is on. We've got, I guess, 500 plus kilometers of roads. We've got recreation services. We've got libraries. The Sky Train is coming to Langley, and we've been paying for it for years through gas tax per liter. I mean, there's a lot of positive things for this community. And as others have said, we don't want to be seen as a last community not delivering the type of services that every citizen requires. And we do our very best to keep taxes low, and we proved that last year, and I think we'll try to do our best. But I think it's still important to move forward, because we are doing a lot of things. I want to thank council and staff for all the improvements we're making. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey?
So looking at this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we will have adequate input, especially after the public gets their consultation, correct?
Correct. So it would go for first, second, and third for public consultation, and then first, second, and third could be amended prior to final. Wouldn't be amended. You could amend it prior to final. You could also slow it down a little bit in January once you have that input.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Ruff, I just want to clarify again. I think Councilor Van Popte had a good point. I believe in last year's financial plan, I mentioned that this year you had projected it to be 15, and here we are with 7.5. Does that sound about right? Correct. So, numbers are what they are until they're finalized. And, I appreciate that capital looks a little different. I think we've outlined that last year. It might be good to look at some more reforms of that process in January. I actually think a workshop or a CPC discussion around capital is actually probably something really worthy of consideration once the council knows what level of capital funding exists within Universal for the balance of the year with all the competing interests that there are. I think that makes a lot of sense, but it's hard to do that until operating is finalized. Maybe just give one last comment about the difference.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously a lot of the funding for capital is coming out of our operating budget with our contributions to the reserves. So yes, that sets helps us set the envelopes.
And then if we have, because there's some one-times contemplated to go to capital projects reserve, there's increases in the transfer to the operating reserve. So it's sort of like the generic sort of capital projects reserve. There's increases to reserves for water and sewer projects. So with that 22.5, potentially with previous year balances, you would be able to come forward in January, by the end of January potentially, and we could look at capital holistically rather than repeat the process that we saw this year in the transition with report after report after report. Potentially council could make that decision at the beginning of the year once we finalize operating funding. That's something that maybe we could look at. Is that correct? Yeah. So I think there's other options. I think why don't we all take 2 weeks with it? I'm probably going to have some ideas on the 18th now that I've seen it in final form, in draft form, going to first and second if this is approved. And I'm going to have, I think, some suggestions for council to look at bringing that down a little bit or not as it goes to public consultation. And I think it's appropriate to see that and do that at first, second, and third, at least for me. So with no other speakers, I'll call the question on the second paragraph. I believe it's unamended, Ms. Bauer, is that correct?
That is correct. We have no amendments.
Unamended, yep. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. So Ms. Ruff, I want to thank you again for that. Does anybody wish to take a bit of a recess before we get on the remainder of the agenda? Why don't we do that now and get 5 minutes? We'll come back at 3:20.
And coming back with the answers to some of
Yes, we can give those answers.
the salary.
Great, so we'll get back underway. Item E1, reports to council, development permit application number 101314. Your motion, please. Moved by Councillor Pratt. Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on E1? Councillor Richter.
Yes, I think the sign is excessively large for the area. Can it be reduced?
Bracken.
Thank you, Your Worship. The sign as proposed complies with the township's signage bylaw.
Okay. And the spia trees, there are 6 trees in the spia which will be retained unless deemed hazardous. If they are removed, are they going to be replaced?
Through Your Worship, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on E1. Councillor Ferguson? Item E1. E1, there we go. Okay, good. That carries unanimously. Item E2, Fraser Highway Employment Lands Area Plan. The council endorsed terms of reference. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm excited about this opportunity to get more jobs in the township for people who hopefully live and work in the township is a good thing, and I think it's a pretty cool opportunity to maybe complete some of the rural trail connections as part of the connected communities. So, looking forward to it.
Yeah, great. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm looking at the map on page 3. I'm very concerned about the extent of this particular area as far north as it extends, particularly at 232nd Street. And also, what appears to me is going to end up being a significant tree canopy loss. So I'm wondering, can the terms of reference for the plan also include an assessment of tree canopy?
Mr. Bracken, would the assessment come through the neighborhood planning process?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Yeah. So do you wish to strengthen the language in the?
Yes, I wish to strengthen. I want tree canopy addressed. I'm not convinced that the boundaries there are the right boundaries to have, but it looks to me by extending the boundaries the way they have been extended, that's where all the tree loss is going to be occurring.
Do you have specific amendments you'd like to move to the terms of reference, or do you wish to wait for the plans to come forward?
Okay, well, we're going to play this game, all right? So I'd like to amend the terms of reference to include consideration of a 4th bulletin, tree canopy and loss of tree canopy and replacement of tree canopy in the area.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Go ahead, Councillor Richter.
No, I think I've made my point, thank you.
All right, Councillor Ferguson.
I'm a little bit, I totally appreciate the comment and amendment made by my colleague, but I wonder if the initiative for environmental assessment would be enough, and I would hate to hamper or jeopardize our request to Metro Vancouver for such a, if I may through the chair, would that cause a problem with Metro Vancouver when we go through the process of public hearing, et
Mr.
cetera?
Bracken, I mean, you maybe give your thoughts on that?
It's an area where caution should be exercised, because you're correct. This has to be sent to Metro Vancouver for an expansion of the urban containment boundary. I think they'd like to see some level of holistic thought into it, and then by adding too many derivations from that, it may complicate matters.
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, I as much as I understand the concern by my colleague, I think the environmental assessment is good enough at this point in time, and I would hate to hamper or cause any concern. And even a little bit of concern at Metro can cause a big differentiating in decision making.
Yeah,
those are my points. Thank you.
Certainly can. Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, just looking at page 11 of the report, which talks about the project principles, which bullet point 3 is environmental protection. It specifically says an environmental assessment as outlined in this document will be one of the first steps in this process, and it goes into talking about the particular key areas, particularly in the key areas of A, aquifer protection, B, tree protection. So this document has already got it as one of its project principles, so I'm not sure if we really need to strengthen the language. It's actually one of the main first things we're doing.
It's there, yep. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I actually appreciate the discussion and Councillor Ferguson raising the issue about Metro Vancouver and Mr. Backen improving that discussion, just because that was something that necessarily didn't come to mind, but I being somewhat familiar with the area, having grown up in Murrayville, and recognizing that there are some red-coated creeks in the area, a lot of those trees will likely fall within the SPEA of those creeks, and so that'll be hopefully a strong way to preserve the tree canopy in the area. So with that, some of my concerns are pretty taken care of.
Great. Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on that amendment to E2. That fails with, that's defeated with Councillors Kuntz, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Martins, Councillor Van Popta, Councillor Pratt, Councillor Ferguson opposed. So back to you, Councillor Richter. Do you have any other amendments?
No, thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
That was it. Thank you.
Great, great. Councillor Martins?
Thank you. Not a question, but just a comment. I appreciate when I'm reading through this document that at each phase of this plan, there is a public engagement involved. And I think that is really important to be having those conversations with the public. So I appreciate that it's not just happening at the beginning or at the end, but every single phase talks about engagement with the public in one form or another. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, I just had a question through your worship to staff. Is there potential for an operating satellite site on these lands?
Mr. Backen?
Technically, Your Worship, if these are successful through the process, they would be considered employment lands, and I think there would be the potential that there could be some areas that could be used for works yards.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm going to see no other discussion. I'll call the question on E2. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Item E3, capital request, climate action funding for energy and emission reduction projects. I'll move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on E3? Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick question in terms of interpreting the report. It talks about the capital requests, but it also talks about that it's in reaction to the LG cap fund. Just don't understand how to read where the grant comes in versus the expenditures that we're requesting. If somebody can help interpret the report better. I don't see reference to the grant funding in there. So is the grant funding offsetting that 185?
Yes, Your Worship. The grant is an annual amount. It normally comes in the summer. It's approximately just over $390,000 that comes in, and then it's up to council to decide how we allocate that to individual projects throughout the year.
So then we have to pre-approve projects that we want it to go to, get the funding, and then we can spend that funding on something else?
Funding comes in automatically. Council allocates it to projects, and then we have to provide a report back on how we spent the funding each
But aren't we determining how we're spending the funding already?
We are right now.
Okay. So we're just doing it earlier this time?
This is 2023 funding.
2023.
Oh, that's where I'm losing it. Okay,
Alright.
good. Thank you. Never mind.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Call the question on E3. That carries unanimously. Item E4, capital request for construction of 208th Street from 72nd Avenue to 76th. I'm definitely moving that. Is there a seconder to that? Is everybody going to put their hand up? They want a second on that? And what do I do now? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there any discussion on E4? Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through yourself to staff. With this section of 208th Street coming, by the looks of it, being constructed almost to the ultimate standard, for those portions of 208th Street that are north of 76th, south of 80th, where there's only a couple of parcels that are undeveloped, and then same thing going for 208th Street north of 80th, between there and the highway. Are there refundable, non-refundable deposits? Are there developer fees in place in order to construct those sections of 208th Street, or are those going to have to require another capital request coming to staff, or coming to council?
Ms. Wag.
Thank you, through your worship. I'm also looking at Mr. Backen and Mr. Richardson. What I can advise is the design for those missing sections, we'll call them after this project, are underway. And as you indicated, there are still some development that is yet to occur. So the mechanism to fund those projects could either be through the capital, funded from DCC, or waiting for the developers to initiate those applications. Just looking to Mr. Richardson for any additional comment.
Thank you, Mrs. Wag. To supplement, I would concur with Mr. Wag's comments. Just from memory, Your Worship, I think the items that the council is referencing are applications that are currently under application and currently post-third reading. Some of them have been held up with provincial approvals, and the other ones, just from recollection, are at third reading, so they would be as part of the servicing agreement process delivered by the development community and would be, where applicable, DCC eligible, Your Worship.
So as a follow-up question to that, because I'm curious, for some of those sections that are not awaiting development on either side of 208th Street, they're still to a non-ultimate standard, you might describe, right? Just painted, they're not up at the ultimate. So for those few parcels that are still awaiting development, I can understand that the fees collected from those developments will go to potentially building 208th Street out in front of those parcels to the ultimate standard. But are we still missing the funds for the remaining sections where the development's already happened? Or are those non-refundable deposits in place?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Pratt, concurring with my colleague, Mrs. Wag. So the difference between the interim and ultimate would be DCC eligible, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you.
Right, seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on E4. That carries with Councillor Richter and Councillor Kunst opposed. Item E5, Housing Action Plan update. I'm going to suggest the council move these individually, potentially moving the first one and then the second two together. Second two seem affected by potentially getting more information about regulations from Bill 44. So I'll move the first one. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Ferguson. And we've received, I think, some good input on this. And council should consider whether to look at an amendment to E5, first part. Ms. Bauer, do you want to bring that up, please? And then if council wants to get more information, they can certainly consider deferring. But I think there's been quite a bit of good information. So this would come back in a bylaw form to be considered, and perhaps a public hearing would be potentially appropriate as well to formalize that feedback process versus a flurry of emails. So I'm going to move amendment number 1 to the recommendation. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Councillor Richter.
Yeah, why are you reducing it to 10%, 5% from 20%?
Believe it be appropriate based upon what I've read in the Housing Action Plan to do more or to do less based upon how you perceive the delivery of these units comparative to other forms of housing in the community, such as row home or townhouse. So I believe that some of the feedback that we've gotten is very rational and reasonable to have council consider this amendment.
Yeah, but families need 3-bedroom apartments, right? Why would we reduce the number of those?
Because the feedback we've gotten, which I know you've received as well, is that the 20% threshold will impact the provision of housing, whereas the price points for townhouses and other forms approach that 3-bedroom apartment price point. So if you don't agree with the feedback, you would presumably oppose this amendment.
Oh, so now you're already telling me how I'm going to vote, are you? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martins? Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm happy to see this amendment here. I too have received feedback from the community, and 20% is a bit high. Coquitlam has a 10%, and they're even finding a lot of units are going unsold. So I think we have to find a balance here. So I appreciate that the numbers have been appropriately reduced.
Councillor Van Popta?
Yeah, I I haven't received the feedback, but I do know from personal experience that 3 bedrooms in apartment format poses some challenges, and we're providing in the other 2 policy items that we can also capture more 3-bedroom in other dwellings like duplexes and suites and such. So by reducing it, we're actually going to create more affordability for building these types of structures versus limiting having such a stringent requirement for 3 bedrooms in an apartment. So there's other housing formats that we can put 3 bedrooms in that are more appropriate.
Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you mentioned, I have no problem with the amendments. You mentioned something about another amendment or an addition that
Yeah.
you would ask for a public hearing, if I may?
So there's a number 2, which I think I'd like to have council's input on, and then we could direct staff, rather than bringing it forward, to schedule a public hearing as part of the process. Mr. Beck, can you remind me if this is coming back, would this come back for first, second, and third, or would it be first, second, and a public hearing? Do we need to ask for a public hearing as part of the process for this one?
If you wish to have a public hearing, your worship, it should come back for first and second then, as opposed to first, second, and third.
Do you know if we do nothing, which form it'll come in? Maybe you could confirm that for us while we process the amendment. So, Mr. Councilor Ferguson, I'll get that confirmed while we process the
Yeah,
amendments.
that's fine. That's
Okay,
fine
great.
with, thank you.
Great, so seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on amendment number 1 of E5. That carries unanimously. So back to the main motion as amended. I'm going to move a second amendment with an overall project average unit size of 750 square feet. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Pratt. So before we get to just the rationale here, I think is to see it come forward within the bylaw and then have the public hearing on this component. And if, hopefully just as a starting point, to see what the feedback is, rather than these flurry of emails, just have a structured feedback process and see what the feedback is on this particular one, if it's successful. Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, I would be curious to see what the feedback is. I think this council's done a lot of things to make sure that the development that's occurring in the township is occurring in such a way that's beneficial to the people who are going to live in the township. I am cautious, however, on some parts of what we do to be overly prescriptive on the people who actually build the housing, because the only thing worse than, in my opinion, having potentially the wrong square footage of unit is to have no unit at all. And so I'd want to make sure that the feedback that we get is early enough in the process that we can make an informed decision here.
Okay. So seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on amendment number 2. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. So now back to the first part as amended. Mr. Backen, do you need a commentary in here to request a public hearing, or will that happen automatically?
Automatically? Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. As it's an amendment to the OCP, it would be automatic.
Yeah, because it's a little, just the reason I'm clarifying, it says prepare a policy, but are we embedding this in the bylaw, the zoning bylaw, or is this a council policy document? So we can also, yeah, maybe just confirm what the process will be.
Maybe Mr. Richardson can help me. When it refers to preparing a bylaw, is it preparing in a bylaw to the zoning bylaw or to the OCP bylaw?
The second recommendation is prepare a policy and consequential bylaw amendments for those units. So likely just be the amendments consistent with the land use bylaw. I don't think it applies to the OCP. The only policy we have in the OCP is the adaptable housing, which is embedded within that, unless there's consequential amendments to the Williams plan, but I think that that's occurring this evening.
Yeah, so just to raise for everybody's attention, the reason I'm raising it is the first paragraph doesn't have the language and consequential bylaw amendments. It just says policy.
So as I understand this, this is it would be an amendment to the zoning bylaw. As it's an amendment to the zoning bylaw, not the OCP, it would not require a public hearing.
Okay.
So if council would like to add a public hearing, that would be within council's direction.
So was it just an oversight that the and consequential bylaw amendments language was omitted from the first recommendation? Is that probably what happened?
Unfortunately, I'm unaware whether they would have to include, I would think so, in that the
Really looks that way.
the rezoning would be a textual amendment, and the textual amendment would include the amending to the bylaw.
Okay, so, again, I'm just gonna, so if you look at the first paragraph, second and third paragraph, the second and third paragraph each have consequential bylaw amendments specifically referenced. That's not included in the first paragraph. So, if that's just an oversight, we can add an element to schedule a public hearing as part of that process, and you can figure out why that language is omitted later on.
Yes,
Okay.
it would require a bylaw anyway, whether it was directed in the
Even though it
motion.
doesn't, yeah, so,
would
because
still
it's
require-
confusing here, it just says policy, it doesn't say
If it
bylaw,
requires a
so
bylaw, it would have to be done anyway.
it's just an oversight, so I'll add an amendment to schedule a public hearing as part of the review process. Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on requesting and requiring public hearing? Seeing none, I'll call the question on E5, paragraph 1 amendment. It carries unanimously. Back to the first part as amended. Any other discussion on that? You good? Councillor Pratt? Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
You're good. So any other discussion on the first paragraph as amended? Seeing none, I'll call the question on that. That carries unanimously. So the second and third one, Mr. Backin, I don't know if you, Mr. Richardson, have any opinions. Are those modified, potentially impacted by Bill 44? Maybe we'd be prudent to defer these until we have the regulations for Bill 44.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report speaks to single-family dwellings and secondary suites, Your Worship, which would be under the purview of the proposed, of Bill 44, Your Worship.
Okay, so I'll move deferral of second and third recommendation and until we have the regulations for Bill 44, seconded by Councillor Martins. Is there any discussion on that deferral? Seeing none, call the question on the deferral of the second and third report. That carries unanimously. So item bylaws for first and second reading, official community plan amendment, rezoning application number 100274, bylaw number 5941, 5942. I'll move it. Is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion? Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Once everybody's had the chance to speak, if they want, I do have an amendment.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, in looking at the diagram on page 5, there is significant tree canopy on this particular subject property, but there's not really any detail on the tree loss and the replacement trees, and I'm just wondering how come.
Thank you, Your Worship. As noted, it's a plan amendment and rezoning at this time. Pardon me. The details of once there was a specific site layout that council would see as part of the development permit, we could determine those tree numbers. I also note the westerly portion of the site is subject to a streamside SPA area, so those trees will be protected, Your Worship.
Okay, but do we know how many trees are going to be protected?
Through Your Worship, all the trees in the streamside protection enhancement area will be protected. And the details of the developable portion of the lands will be determined at time of development permit when we know exactly what the site planning looks like, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I did provide to the clerk wording for the amendment. However, I'll probably move it with an additional change, if that's okay. So, I don't know if it's on everybody's screen. It just left mine. So as it's currently written, the amendment would be that bylaws 5941 and 5942 be amended to permit commercial space on the ground floor. I'd like to add the words and/or institutional between the words commercial and space.
Okay, so we'll just get that on the.
And I
Is there a second or that's seconded by Councillor Martins? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just think that with this site being in close proximity to future rapid transit and in a pretty significant node for the township, that it would be prudent to make sure that we have all options on the table for the site.
Yeah, so you're not requiring it, you're just, that would be an option at the development permit stage.
Correct.
Yeah. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on that amendment. F1. That carries unanimously. So back to F1 as amended. Is there any other discussion on F1 as amended? Seeing none, call the question. That carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Bylaws for final adoption, Fraser Valley Intermunicipal Business License Bylaw Amendment, bylaw number 59605961. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on I1? Seeing none, call the question on I1. That carries unanimously. I2, Langley Building Bylaw Amendment, Energy Step Code, bylaw number 5966. Is there a mover to that? Moved by Councillor Van Popta. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Any discussion on I2? Seeing none, call the question on I2. Carries unanimously. I3, Council Procedure Bylaw 2016 Amendment, bylaw number 5963. I'll move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rent. Any discussion on I3? None. Call the question on I3. That carries unanimously. J1 deferred. So this is back on the floor, I believe, Ms. Bauer. It was deferred. Is that correct? So that was moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Rent. So I do have a referral motion. See no speakers. You could bring that up, Ms. Bauer. Oh, Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify if the effect of this particular bylaw means that if the fees for secondary suites are not paid, then the properties would be eligible for tax sale by the township every year?
Mr. Becken?
No, not quite, Your Worship. The fees for the secondary suites would be added to the tax roll. If the taxes then were not paid within a certain period of time, then the property would go into, I guess, a tax sale mode. However, that would be dependent upon them not paying their taxes, which could include the suite fee, but in their entirety for a number of years.
Okay. So, in other words, if people don't pony up and pay their fees, they could very well end up with a property tax sale.
It's more the other way around. If they don't pay their taxes, then those taxes could include the fees. Then they could be facing a tax sale. If they were simply to ignore the relatively minimal amount for the secondary suite, it's unlikely that would reach the threshold. It will take a number of more years for that to reach the threshold for a tax sale.
But it is a potential outcome of this.
Theoretically, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to move the referral on the screen. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rent. So the referral here, refer this back to staff for report outlining how annual licenses for secondary suites could be replaced. Emphasis on could be. The secondary suite line item applied with municipal property taxation, a transition plan, potential benefits thereof, including but not necessarily limited to a reduction in staff time, arrears collection, and community overhead. So I think I did meet with staff on this, and I thought this would be important to bring to council for an option. Right now we have about 1,000, I understand, and it's being done as a business license. So the same process for a business license is what's being applied for homeowners who don't have a business, they have a suite. And so, for example, when the property is transitioning in a sale, they're transitioning or transferring their business license and all the overhead associated with that. There's a number of, I think, unintended consequences through running it through a business licensing plan. And with Bill 44 coming, we could see a significant expansion of quantity of these. So I think it'd be appropriate for council to look at this option, and it always still has the option in here, and with this in this report, just simply allow or the arrears to go on the property tax roll as opposed to secondary suite in its entirety, which runs with the property mostly. They're there for a very long time. This could potentially reduce a lot of red tape that's going on currently. So that's the rationale for this report to come forward. Is there any other discussion on this referral? Seeing none, call the question on J1. That carries unanimously. For information, any discussion on items for, does anybody have any mayor and council report? Councillor Pratt? No? Any reports? Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that we have one more meeting before we can talk about the Council 150. And I know we've been very busy with delivery of budget and other things, but But the Township of Langley is indeed celebrating the 150 years as a corporation. I know we've got pins now, we've got a flag, 150 years, and we've had a number of events this year, and I wanted to thank staff, and perhaps maybe next meeting, because it'll be the last one, that those that wanted to say something, I know that Councillor Richter, myself, Councillor Kuntz have got a long history here with the township, and as yourself and others, if anyone wants to say something, next meeting might be their best time, because it's a real accomplishment for 150 years as an incorporation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other mayor and council report, regional report? No, seeing none. Anyone discuss or have a motion for information? Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The first one being on the N1, the school and park site history and financial projections. On page 2, where it talks about the planned school and park sites in both Willoughby and Brookswood Fernridge, I just want to double check the math on that. That alone now, not including and not factoring in potential provincial implications as a result of the legislation that's come down, we're looking at approximately in land and development costs, $826 million for the remaining schools. And so you can only just imagine what the implication on that number might be as a result of potential future projections for schools and general population as a result of provincial policy. So I just wanted to flag that for everybody's attention, because that is a significant number. While I'm here on for information items, item number 4 from the AAEEC, one item of concern that came out of the last meeting of the committee was in regards to Metro Vancouver open burning emission regulation bylaw 1355. And I just wanted to ask a question through yourself to staff, if anybody would be able to answer it. For those who aren't aware, this is an additional burning permit in addition to the townships that's administered by Metro Vancouver, with an additional fee, additional regulations on the size, on the scope, and the type of burning that people can do on their properties. And I'm wondering, was there any consultation with municipalities where people are actually farming, where people might have actual burning issues prior to this regulation being put in place that now requires 2 applications, 2 fees to be paid by township residents? I'm wondering if that public engagement happened.
Your Worship, I don't think any public engagement occurred locally. I can add, though, that staff are nearing completion of a memo on the subject matter, because you're correct, it's a 2-step process with a 2-step fee. And I think we can probably circulate that by the next meeting, so we can actually have that to clarify matters.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Martins.
Thank you. With regards to 2 items, the first one, the joint school park sites report. On page 4, second to last paragraph, the first sentence and last sentence, historically the province school district has contributed to the joint sites by either building their own soil-based playing fields or contributing financially to the development of shared playing fields. And then the last sentence, recently, with newer school construction in Willoughby, and for various reasons, a number of these contributions have been reduced or eliminated, thereby reducing the overall benefit to the township of having such joint sites. I'm just wondering, if I can, through the chair, if I can get some clarification on why there has been this shift recently. Is it strictly budgeting for the school district, or?
Your Worship, we think it's primarily, I guess, financial in nature, with the costs of the land and the cost of the schools, and you're looking at, say, adding additional lands for park or community use, it becomes very significant. So I think what's taking place is they're capitalizing on those areas where they may have relations, and they can actually stretch their dollar further. And I think that's the only thing that we've come up with in terms of what's going on.
Thank you. And I'm trying to understand the connection to the reducing the overall benefit to the township of having such joint sites. Does it mean the township as an entity versus the people living in the township? Because I don't know if they would really differentiate that.
It's really corporation to school district.
Okay.
What we used to see, for example, was joint playing fields constructed in joint washrooms. What we're seeing is that there's now restrictions on some of those, so less playing fields, less washrooms. The effect of all that is less of a benefit to the corporation, in that we must then try to fund those issues separately, and as well to the residents, I suppose, because they don't have the use that they used to have.
Thank you. Okay. And then my other question is with regards to item number 3, childcare facilities planning. I understand there's a feasibility study underway. So I guess my comment and then my question is if this is including proximity to elementary schools. I can speak as a parent having had children for years in childcare facilities. It's stressful at best to find suitable childcare in the first place. If the childcare that you find when the children are very young, first entering that programming, if it's nowhere near elementary schools, that then requires a couple years in that the parent then has to find different childcare for when they need before and after school care when the kids get to elementary school age. I think it is really important, and I would love to see this included in that study, that the consideration is given for the proximity to elementary schools to eliminate that stress, which is very big for parents. It does make, the whole topic is very difficult for parents, so anything we can do to reduce their stress by keeping it near schools would be fabulous. So I don't know if that requires a motion or if that can be added to the study.
Mr. Bracken, do you have any thoughts on that?
We can simply add that portion to it, Your Worship. It's just really a more holistic approach.
Do you wish the security of a motion? We can certainly do that.
If it's being added, that's fine with me.
Okay.
And then my only other question about that, I noticed that, through social media that there is some online survey happening, but it seems to be for people in proximity to the sites. And I'm wondering why it's being limited to that audience versus people across the township. How do we decide who the user groups are in advance of the study?
Mr. Bracken?
That we'll have to get back to you on, Your Worship. We're not aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yes, we just went through budget, and we're going to continue with budget, and I'm going to refer again to, as referred by some of my colleagues as well, to N1, the joint school park site history and finance. Now, I guess I got a couple of simple questions, and I don't know how simple to begin with. The first one is that it's an agreement between the school district and the township of Langley. Now, the school district is made up of both the township and the city. So if we put some money aside for parks or recreational services adjacent to a school site, does the city of Langley contribute, knowing that their students will be going to a school in the township, either secondary or elementary, if I may through the chair?
I think we know the answer, but we can have Mr. Bracken confirm. Did they contribute, Mr. Bracken?
No, I don't believe they contribute, but we have been able historically to focus the amenities in the area of township areas of growth. I'm not saying exclusively, I'm simply saying there's been that willingness to focus. A lot of the schools, I guess, with the city are in developed areas. That doesn't mean it couldn't change, but that's how we've managed it to date.
And Councillor Ferguson, I think we've seen what the township is now going to have 3 high schools within the slope and within Willoughby, potentially, with significant costs to operate those facilities. Does the city of Langley contribute to the operation of the facilities for their high school?
No.
No, they do not. Yeah.
So I can, supplemental, can we simply ask them, just politely? Knowing the fact, I wouldn't expect a Langley city resident to pay for, their anything regarding Blacklock School. Their kids walk to school, they go to Black, but if they have to go to International Baccalaureate program, or if they have to go to a secondary program, those are in the township, unless the city themselves want to start building some secondary schools. So that's, can we ask them? My second thing is, just a comment, if my son wants to play for, Surrey Minor Hockey as a representative, he's a little bit old now, he'd have to pay Surrey Minor Hockey to play there. It's pretty well the same thing. If you go to another area, you pretty well have to pay, or pay a supplemental. That's just a simple question. Maybe we can ask. The next question I have is, on your history and financial projection, was there also not, I know it might take a tiny bit of time to compare what other districts were doing as well. That's surrounding districts, including Fraser Valley Regional District, Abbotsford, and basically Mission, Chilliwack, and then going to some of the regional district, Coquitlam, get an idea of what they do. Then we can get an idea of how we compare with other surrounding municipalities and what they do with park sites and things like that, if I may, through a chair. Not looking forward to that.
Your worship, we haven't undertaken that. It's a significant exercise. It could be done, but it would be a matter of resources. I'm just wondering if it might not be appropriate perhaps to ask the province for that breakdown, that information, as they'd have that available through the Ministry of Education.
Yeah, if you can ask, certainly. And I think we can also do some of our own research, like maybe municipal councilors or something. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I'd just like to draw attention to N5. I know we don't do proclamations, but, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, really, June the 30th, 2024, as being proclaimed as Indigenous Survivors Day is an important issue. This is something that the township should be paying, hopefully will pay attention to and maybe cooperate with some other people like our First Nations that are here. And just, this is the unfortunate part of not proclaiming, is because we could greatly help with the outreach of the awareness of the importance of this day. So just want to really make sure that this doesn't get lost, and come June the 30th, 2024, that the township is participating in some way, even though we don't proclaim it.
Appreciate that. Councillor Van Popta.
Yeah, just in hearing Councillor Ferguson's comments regarding Langley City's contributions. Through your worship to staff, are we aware of any other school districts that are combined with multiple municipalities? Like, Langley students aren't going to Surrey schools, but we've got a combined school board between Langley City and Langley Township. But if the Langley Township is building and providing the lands, do we encounter this situation in any other metro regions that have combined school boards?
Your worship, the one that comes to mind is White Rock and Surrey, where they have one school board and two communities. In Metro, I'd have to then go to the Tri-Cities and determine what their boundaries are. I'm not certain. Throughout the province, there's a number as well, but those are generally historical in nature. And I'm trying to think of, I think there's another grouping in perhaps the North Shore that may have at least one or two school districts, but I'm not certain.
Okay, thank you.
And the challenge being, Mr. Bracken, I believe we're unique in the sense that the civic institution, the township, is providing facilities to the school district, which is, I think, somewhat unique for cities to be doing that to the level that we are. We've been told that we're unique in that regard. They celebrate it at UBCM and so forth. The challenge being when you share those facilities with another city that doesn't contribute. Yeah. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I can help with that one. Semiahmoo High School used to be in the city limits of White Rock and is now not. They've moved that. The junior high also is not in White Rock, so White Rock's very similar to this.
Councillor Ferguson?
Okay, so as a procedural, I think, if I may, through a chair, I'm going through what Councillor Bailey has said. Now, we have the procedural bylaw where we don't give proclamations, but in the case of the Indigenous Survivors Day, I don't know if we, through motion, could make a exception based on provincial and federal legislation regarding the spirit of reconciliation.
And Ms. Bauer, it's not in the procedure bylaw, but see if it's in that council policy that's referenced in the clerk's note. Theoretically, council can, by resolution, grant the proclamation or direct staff to grant the proclamation. I'm not sure the exact wording, but also then, if council wished, it could ask for an amendment to that policy to exclude First Nations, like and celebrate proclamations requested for First Nations issues. Is that something?
It would just be a motion of council
Yeah.
to address a council
So then
proclamation.
I'd be prepared to make that motion if maybe.
So, Councillor Ferguson, no issue with it. I'd certainly support it. Just want to make sure the procedure is correct. We could agree to this request?
Yes.
And then ask staff to advance a policy amendment such that there'll be an automatic exception for all future Indigenous reconciliation requests. They would be exempted from the current no proclamations policy. That might be appropriate if they're going to start to be exempted. Or council could ask for that exemption in a report to come forward well in advance of maybe considering this one. If you wish to proceed in those ways, you could consider that.
Yes. Do you want me to do that right now?
If you wish,
I
or
would
you
so
could do
make
it,
that
you
move
could,
that the staff would be referred for.
I'll do it if it's not controversial. If any member of council wants that as a notice of motion, that certainly feels like it would be appropriate. We could certainly agree to this request in plenty of time.
You can ask council if they want to.
Does anybody have any issue with Councilor Richter May? So Councilor Richter, you wish to have that as a notice of motion?
I think it should be a notice of motion, and I also think we should get some legal clarification on it.
So with that, Councilor Ferguson, why don't we proceed with the notice of motion next meeting, and I'll help coordinate that. Councilor Van Popta?
Yeah, just, I've never heard of this day. I think it's something that's worthy to be recognized. I just want to make sure, because it's coming from one group, that is this a date that they have chosen, or is this a nationally recognized date? I just want to make sure when we do that study that we're not duplicating and somebody else is going to come also with the same proclamation, that we're recognizing it once, and if this is a date that's being recognized across Canada.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to look at a policy amendment. Yeah, so we'll do it that way. And Councilor Ferguson, your intent is to bring that forward, and okay, great. So we'll. Great. Councilor Richter, go ahead.
No, that was my comment, actually, that I just thought that maybe we should get legal advice over, well, I think we've had legal advice before on if we start doing for one group, are we then obligated to do for every cultural group?
Anything else on items for information? Anyone else? Great. So we'll move on to 01. Is there a mover and seconder to that? Moved by Councillor Pratt. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rent. Councillor Rent, go ahead.
I would like to make a referral motion.
I have other first-time speakers, so I can come back to you on
Sure.
that. Okay, great. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I noted in the minutes of the AEEC committee that a number of organizations were mentioned, but the Farmers Institute wasn't. So I would hope that the Farmers Institute will also be one of the organizations that are consulted as part of this. Is that the intent?
Mr. Bagan?
It can be, Your Worship, yes.
Great. So I'll go back to Councillor Rent. Go ahead.
That council refers this back to be considered by the newly formed Agriculture Advisory Committee within Q1 2024.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any discussion of that referral? Do you have any to speak to that? No? Councillor Richter?
Yeah, why would we need to refer it back?
Councillor Rent, do you have any reason? I believe the committee's changing. Is maybe that's the reason?
Yeah, the committee is changing.
Yeah,
so-
but the committee's becoming an all agriculture committee. Why would they say no?
Okay, so any other discussion on the referral? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the referral of 01. That carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Pratt opposed. Other business, P1, potential repeal of Booth, Rinn, Fernridge neighborhood plans. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rent. So I'll read the resolution. Maybe we could speak to some of the whereases. I don't know if it's possible to bring it up on the screen, Ms. Bauer, just the resolution portion, that therefore be it resolved that council hereby directs staff to initiate the repeal of Booth, Rinn, and Fernridge neighborhood plans as soon as it is confirmed that the Township of Langley has not been granted an exemption from the implementation of Bill 44 via legislation or regulations for developing areas within the urban containment boundary. So legislation has passed, so that portion of the motion we can confirm. Staff can confirm that, but the regulations will be critical. And I think when we get those regulations, they'll be pretty obvious, I think, whether if there's no exemption, it's very clear. If there's no exemption, I think it's fair to say it'll be very challenging for those plans to move forward as they are, at least as I see it. Given the whereases, the implications of Bill 44 are quite significant in regards to the potential population of going up from 47 projected as high as 120, which does not include Glenwood. So there'd be more in addition to that. That is simply by Bill 44. Without the school planning, park site planning, and park space planning to go along with that projected population. So at the very least, it's going to need an update, a pretty substantial one, I think. And I don't think it's fair that we have proponents with property spending money on applications for a plan, in my opinion, severely negatively impacted by Bill 44. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, I would actually like some information about how many existing lots would actually be, meet the criteria for Bill 44. Most of Brookswood is not actually on sewer and water. There are certain areas that there are. So I guess I'm not really all in favor of repealing the Brookswood neighborhood plans without really more information on what it would add, like what it would give us by repealing it.
Sir Bracken, do you have any commentary?
Your Worship, I don't think we have a good sense of the numbers. We do, of course, in terms of the ones that are listed, but existing ones, I think we'd be looking to wait to see what the exemption information provides to us, then we could do a calculation from that.
Okay. Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I think it's a good point that Councillor Kunst raised, and I guess it leads to a question of mine. In the, what we'll call already urbanized part of Brookswood, where a lot of these lots might not actually have sewer connections at the moment, should Bill 44 be passed in its entirety, royal assent given, and all these regulations come down, is there anything stopping individuals or property owners from potentially acquiring a whole bunch of the old urbanized Brookswood lots, requesting a local area service initiative, receiving sewer, and then proceeding to develop the 3-plex, 4-plex type development that the province is encouraging?
Yeah, so I'm going to sort of jump in a little bit there. This motion is very specific to Boothrin and Fernridge, not the developed areas of Brookswood. Right now, many of the developed areas of Brookswood are exempted from Bill 44 with lack of sewer service on the street. There is some language that's come out from the ministry regarding that municipalities may be expected to deliver that infrastructure over some period of time. So we're still waiting for that. This here is specific to the creation of new single-family subdivisions for which the township has lost control over the projection of population, which has completely blown the school site, park site planning process.
Yeah, and I think that clarification is important, and I appreciate it, because I do appreciate the fact that we are in a housing crisis and that we do need to deliver homes, and we need to deliver the homes that people can afford. However, I think this is an opportunity that we can even improve upon the plans that were created and that were finalized, and I'm looking forward to potentially having that opportunity. I'm choosing to look at the positive here. I know that there's some serious challenges. I know that there's some serious negatives, but I think it's an opportunity to go through the planning process and really hone in on what kind of community we can create down in Brookswood Fernridge.
Great. Councillor Martins?
Thank you. 2 points here. So in this, in the motion, it says a township of Langley has not been granted an exemption. I would appreciate more information on what efforts the township has gone to pursue that, or conversations that have been had. Yeah, I don't know if it's from yourself, Mr. Mayor, or from staff, if you could maybe enlighten council on what steps we've tried to do. I know there's a lot of people are thrown off by the province kind of, just bringing this on us. So I'm just curious what efforts we have done to perhaps advocate for Langley.
Yeah, Mr. Bracken, do you have any summaries?
Primarily verbal inquiries, and to which the response was that it's a bit premature. They will be providing a formal exemption process in terms of what that process should look like and what the I guess, material elements of it would be. At this point, though, it's safe to say that the statement that we've not been granted an exemption is correct, but it's based on very preliminary work.
Okay, thank you. So since it's still preliminary work, I'm concerned that we might be jumping on this a little too quick. and full-scale repeal rather than looking at amending based on the information we get. That is my only concern. The other thing I'm confused by, quite frankly, is that in this notice of motion, we are looking to repeal neighborhood plans that were very recently adopted after a lot of work has gone into that. And then this evening, we're talking about another neighborhood plan that does have single-family dwelling development included in that plan, and we're looking to pursue that and move forward with it. So I feel like I'm receiving some mixed messages on what the township's approach is to responding to this Bill 44.
Councillor Richter?
Yeah, a couple of questions, and I thank Councillor Martins for raising the granted an exception, because my question was, have we even applied for one? Have we applied for one?
Mr. Bracken?
We can't technically apply till they actually issue the regulations. Verbally, we've been advised it's premature. Once the regulations are in place, there'll be the document packages that they will provide. At that point, we can formally apply, but at this point, it's we're not eligible for an exemption because the criteria is not known.
Okay, and in whereas number 4, it states 47,000 residents to projected to be approximately 115 to 120,000 residents. Where is this number coming from? Has the ministry confirmed that?
Hasn't been confirmed. I think it's our calculation based on an extrapolation of the number of lots multiplied from, rather than a multiplier of 1, a multiplier of 3 to 4. You don't obviously get 100% take up in that, but if you take that number and you multiply it by, say, an average of 3 or 3.5 or whatnot, you come to those numbers.
So these are internally generated numbers, then? They haven't been verified?
That's correct. This is based on some assumptions in terms of the take-up of the number of the units.
Okay.
Mr. Bracken, would you typically verify numbers provided to us by community policy and planning? Or do we trust the staff numbers that are presented to us?
They're usually coming from staff, and then they're often provided to members of council for their interest and information. So once we provide preliminary estimates, we don't usually go back until there's a need to.
Thank you.
Okay, but, I mean, we're basically going after the provincial government here. It would be nice to know if these are their numbers or just our numbers. I think the concern that I have over this whole thing is that we have a current Minister of Housing, Minister Cavallon, who has gone out in public and said it doesn't apply to our neighborhood plans. And our neighborhood plans, which took years to develop, used a very comprehensive and thorough appreciative inquiry approach where people looked at discovery and destiny and dreaming, and they came up with a plan that had a vision, that had meaning, and there was back and forth with all the people that had input into this plan. But eventually they came to an agreement that they could all live with, which would allow, as I recall the original vision, the towering majestic trees in Brookswood to remain, or some of them anyway. So I'm wondering why we're not meeting with Minister Cavallon first. Why aren't we talking to him before we jump into this very aggressive move to repeal our plans, which I think is a slap in the face to the members of the public in this community that in good faith put lots of time and attention into these plans.
Didn't you vote against them, Councillor?
Okay, you know what? The snarkiness has got to
I'm
stop.
just clarifying.
The tone is set at the top, Mr. Mayor, and you're not setting a very professional tone.
I'm just confused.
Now,
You voted against them.
you're just being snarky. Knock it off. Thank you.
Okay, you want to keep the plans that you voted against?
No,
just clarifying your
I
position.
don't want to jump the gun and piss in the province's cornflakes just so that I can get on TV. Okay?
Okay.
I would like to do due diligence and reach out to Minister Cavallon and have a discussion with him. And that is my referral motion to meet, to extend an invitation to the minister to come and talk to us, hear a presentation from staff, and get his insights as to whether this plan that has had all this time being developed is now completely out to lunch, because I don't believe it is completely out to lunch.
Okay, so just want to clarify a couple of things. So but I think approximately 50 to 60% of the Booth Rent Fernridge plan are a variety of single-family housing forms of a variety of sizes from 4,000 to 10,000 square foot lots. The legislation is very specific about by right, so that the moment a single-family subdivision is created, the township has limited options to restrict the density of those subdivisions. So there is a potential now that these plans, we heard a lot from the public about how 60,000 was too high and too excessive, and these plans potentially create a population projection of the numbers listed here by some pretty simple math, which will completely overwhelm the projected school sites. So you could potentially start opening up areas with the school sites included currently, and then end up with double the population and nowhere to put students.
I'm not arguing with that.
So
What I'm arguing with is the extreme nature
I
of this.
didn't interrupt you, Councillor Richter. So
I still have the floor. You cut me off and you jumped in and started talking over me.
I thought you were finished, Councillor Richter.
No, I'm not finished. I'm finished when I say I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, so I think you said you had a referral. I have other first-time speakers. I can come back to you, but
Okay, I have a referral, and my referral will be, or deferral, for an invitation being extended to the minister to come and talk to us more about this and whether this is in fact, this drastic move that's being contemplated here is in fact going to be necessary.
okay. Well, we can come back to you. Councillor Kuntz, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess my question would be, say, we end up repealing the plans and then the legislation comes out as to exactly what we can do, then what?
Oh, so this motion stipulates very clearly to not consider that until the regulations are clear that the plan would proceed with the right for 4 to 6 units per single-family lot, which yields the 120. So you wouldn't see that process wouldn't initiate until it's made very clear to us that there will be no exemption, and that by right we will have to grant 4 to 6 units for every new subdivision. And so then, the challenge I'm experiencing is people are coming to my office, just, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And they're spending money on creating and opening up areas with single-family subdivisions. They're negotiating for school sites. They're talking about detention ponds. And is it responsible to have them spending that money and that time and staff time when we're now faced with a single-family subdivision plan, essentially in many areas, which has gone from 10 UPA to 40 UPA. And this is here for council to consider what to do. And if it wants to leave the plans in place, that's great. I can do that.
So do you know that if are there any developers that, actually want to change to all kinds of, fourplexes on their single-family lots? I mean, do we know that for certain that that's what, most developers are going to do?
The challenge being that once the subdivision is created and they were to sell it, they would have the right to do that regardless of what the township has to say in it. So you're dealing in a scenario where you don't know any longer what the projected population will be based on the housing form that's been approved by council. And if we had a public hearing and we told residents that the projected population is 47 and now it's 120, I question the legitimacy of the plan.
Okay, so.
But if council doesn't agree, then it can proceed. Yeah.
Just one more question, just so that I understand. Do we change then the plans and the density? It seems like that we don't really have a lot of options. At least we have a plan in place at this point, that if we repeal it, do we have to start all over?
No, so I think council could consider that, do the plans in the current form. I think we're beyond what we're facing with item P2, which is potentially some referrals and some OCP amendments to deal with that situation. Here we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of acres that were designated under a certain regime that has been taken away. And so do the plans have democratic legitimacy? So at least repeat the bylaw process would be one option. Another option would be to direct an amendment, but to me, in the meantime, do you have people that are proceeding to try to develop under plans which now have projected populations of over double what we had agreed with the community? And so that's
But
the
won't we
challenge.
be required to, won't they be allowed to do that anyways? whether
Mr.
they have
Backin,
these-
perhaps you can help here.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the concern is over the new lots to be created. I think the existing lots are of a lesser concern because if one were to take the plans and step back from them, we would have much larger lot sizes. Going forward, though, I think the problem is that if we actually have a relatively small lot, 7,000 square foot, and then that would be bought by someone and with the intention of even having a house on it, the next buyer could simply revert that back to something different, and that causes some of the complications in terms of the planning area as to the infrastructure and the amenities that we've been discussing.
Okay, I'm probably not in support of it because I just think we're jumping the gun as far as I'm concerned. And if we were to meet with Minister Kalon about this, maybe there could be some, certainty as to, what it is. I see this as more for other communities where they have the infrastructure in place and that maybe Brookswood is, not really in that same, that same place. But, and I guess we'll be discussing P2 because that'll be my next question about in-stream.
Okay, understood. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And the discussion around this is obviously a bit intense on both sides, and I think that we need to come back down to earth a little bit and realize that builders will build what they can sell. And I think that the challenge being with the new Brookswood plans, we are planning on delivering the utilities necessary that would enable builders who are receiving a 20-lot, single-family subdivision, bare land, that now all of a sudden, some may not, but they would all be able to build up to 3 to 4 units on it. And as somebody who values the planning process and who's somebody who also can't afford a house, I'm torn a little bit. But the reality is that I think it'd be a disservice to the people who anticipated a certain type of Brookswood being built, that all of a sudden we say all that decade-long work is for naught because it's completely up in the air. So I think that this, while some can see it, I think rightfully so, as potentially a little bit premature, I think it is, I would rather be having these conversations now before we're too late. And we're still saying the repeal is not happening today. The repeal would be happening at a certain point in the future, depending on if we get an exemption or not. And I remember, it's not an official capacity in any way, but I remember seeing the minister at an event and his staff was there, and I remember flagging a couple concerns, and it was mentioned to me, hey, it's a good flag, good raise. None of those concerns have been addressed in the provincial policies. And I'm just one councillor. I know that they're not going to listen to me, but I don't know necessarily if the policies that they're bringing in place, which in my opinion are designed to target cities like Vancouver and cities like Richmond and Burnaby, which maybe haven't been delivering the housing that they should in close proximity to rapid transit, should be applied in the same fashion in a brand new subdivision in an area with no transit access and no plan for that in the near future. So I think that this is being proactive. It might be being proactive at an extreme level, but I would just at this point really prefer to be rather safe than sorry. And so I'd support this based on the fact that if there's an exemption given, fantastic. We're in good shape. If there's not, then I want to start from a point where we can create a new Brookswood Fernridge plan that actually works, that can deliver all the housing we need, but isn't doing it in such a way that could jeopardize the financial future of the township.
Okay, appreciate that. Councillor Bailey?
A little clarification. I had the opportunity to discuss this with Minister Callan and some other ministers, including officials from the Minister of Education, and raised in both the amount of people that can come into this neighborhood, but also the severe lack of our ability to deal with the schools. It was very clearly articulated to me by the minister that there will be no exemptions, but what I'm really waiting for is the regulations, because that is what's going to enable the legislation, and it will give you the details of what is going to go on. And so I like the fact that this is going to be triggered by regulations coming out, and that's when you'll find out, because the legislation is an oversight, and the regulation that enables the legislation is what will tell you exactly how this is going to roll out.
I want to highlight too, item 2 and 3 do not allow us to require parking for units beyond the first one. So I personally have no idea how that's going to work. Councillor Van Popte, go ahead.
Yeah, I see this motion as just putting a pause on Brookswood until we understand what the regulations are. I think it's irresponsible of us to proceed knowing that we've got legislation coming out that is going to drastically change our plans. We have a great opportunity here that most municipalities won't have, which is that we can accommodate these requirements within the Brookswood Neighborhood Plan if we pause it now and take into consideration what's coming down the pipe. We don't have that opportunity within Walnut Grove. We don't have that opportunity within Murrayville. We don't have that opportunity in already established areas. But we have this opportunity with Brookswood to build out Brookswood in compliance with this bill if there's not an exemption. So at this point, it is prudent. I echo Councillor Pratt's many statements. This is us being thoughtful and protecting ourselves. We have an opportunity here to do it right, and so we're just pausing until we get all the information, and then we can go from there. So at this point, it is the best course of action. It's not a permanent action. It's just a repeal for now until we understand what is coming down the pipe.
Yeah, the repeal process, Mr. Bracken, is quite simplistic, right? It's a very simplistic bylaw that comes forward, has a public hearing. It's not a lengthy amount of work that would potentially be considered. So if it came forward and council didn't want it or had other direction, this wouldn't be the end of the world. Is that correct?
Effectively, that's correct, Your Worship.
Yeah. Councillor Martins.
Thank you. A couple comments I have. So the word repeal, and I think that is the one I'm having the difficulty with. Repeal, I just looked up the definition to confirm I understood the word right. It means to revoke. That's very different than pause. So that's the worry I have, that this is a bit extreme, that we're pulling it back. That's how it works with legislation, as opposed to waiting to see. The other thing, I'm just wondering if we could do, and I don't know if this would be is an amendment or another motion from council. Mary, you said that we're waiting, that we believe we haven't been granted an exemption. But that's still preliminary conversations, nothing official. Is there an opportunity for us as council to have further conversation just to confirm that and vet that out for sure, one way or another, rather than just relying on conversations?
Mr. Bracken, is it typical for council? I mean, council can certainly make the invitation, but do councillors advocate on behalf of the corporation to the province?
Usually it's done by way of a resolution with direction, Your Worship.
So we could certainly make the invitation. I've met with the minister twice. Councillor Bailey's met with him at a convention. To me, this wording is a formality. There will be no exemption. So you have to, I think council is facing a decision of providing certainty to property owners and people that are spending money, knowing that the ramifications of Bill 44 without even allowing for parking requirements in remote areas of Fern Ridge is what we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I appreciate your concerns around that, and I get that. I until I see it in black and white, I got my rosy colored glasses on. I'm just holding out a bit of hope that they might still make some changes in what they're deciding to do, particularly when we get into the weeds with the regulations. It might not be as black and white as we think. That was all.
The minister was asked about our commentary at a press conference, and he suggested that we change the plans.
Okay.
Councillor Kunst, do you want to speak again?
Yeah, I just had one last question. If we know what other communities are doing, I mean, this is impacting everyone around the province. If there's other communities repealing plans, or if we know.
Mr. Bracken, I think we're one of the few in Metro Vancouver with the scale of Greenfield. So I think City of Surrey, City of Maple Ridge, and City of Surrey are very unique.
That's correct, Your Worship. I think those are still in development. I think we're perhaps a little bit ahead of the crowd at the moment, but we expect to be caught up to very quickly.
Yeah, that's what I expect as well. Councillor Van, do you want to have anything else? You good? You good? Okay. Councillor Van Popda, go ahead.
And sorry, just one final question. If we do repeal these now, we have the opportunity to bring them back later.
Yeah, there's no repealing going on right now. This is to consider a repeal bylaw if there's no exemption granted. So then the repeal could come forward. It could be voted down.
Okay, perfect.
Right, based upon feedback. We could have a public hearing. Repeal requires a public hearing, so everybody with an interest in property in these areas would have a chance to give input before that. To me, this would be engaging with the public on what's happened as much as redoing a plan would be. It's a process to formally engage with the public on whether we should allow these plans to proceed in light of Bill 44 or not. That's what would come from the process. So there may be just a misunderstanding of what the process would be. We don't see it very often.
No,
That's
I
why.
appreciate
Yeah.
that commentary. So we're not actually repealing here,
No.
we're just initiating.
This is to bring it forward for consideration of that process once it's confirmed in regulations that we will not have an exemption, and I'm fairly confident that there will not be one.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So Councillor Richter, you wish to make a motion?
Yes, I wish to make a motion that we defer this motion until a meeting with the BC Minister of Housing and his staff has been offered, accepted, and held.
So what if he refuses it?
Well, if he refuses it, then the motion would come back, wouldn't it?
Mr. Back, and I believe it would sit there forever until he accepts an invitation, the way that was worded. Is that correct?
It would pose a challenge, Your Worship,
Yeah.
because we have to determine what would be a reasonable period of time to wait to treat that as being a refusal, and that, of course, would be challenging.
What if he accepts it for next Christmas?
Good example.
Yeah. So is there an alternative way you can maybe get to the intent, Councillor Richter?
Okay, the intent of the motion, and Mr. Back, and perhaps you can help me word this, is I think we need to invite the minister and his senior staff to come and meet with this council and our senior planning and engineering staff and make him or show him a presentation on what is anticipated as part of the 3 neighborhood plans that we have approved, and ask him at that meeting if we are within our reasonable rights to consider moving forward with this plan, or with these plans.
Mr. Bragan, do you have that?
Your Worship, I think it's something along the lines of that the matter be deferred until there's an invitation made to the Ministry of Housing to attend a council or to attend upon council for the purpose of discussing and reviewing the matter to occur no later than
I don't know,
first
because
quarter.
Richard, do you have a timeline? How long do you wish?
First quarter of 2024.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Kunst. Is there any discussion? Yeah, I'll wait. Go ahead, Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's a little bit of a, it's a very, very interesting and controversial thing we're all going through. It's not just here today at the table. The whole province is dealing with challenges with these bills, Bills 44 and others. I was wondering if Mr. Mayor, that we could continue on with this, with the direction of staff to repeal, because we have to put the new bylaws in place and add on, and that the mayor and council, or the mayor and staff continue requesting the minister and his staff present before council, given our concerns.
Yeah.
Rather, an addition, not continue on, but and an addition, and I just wondered what you thought of that, if I may through it, Chair.
Some alternative, Councillor Ferguson, this could have been done as a subsequent motion. They could run concurrently. There's no reason they can't run concurrently. So if this is not approved, we could look at requesting that meeting in regards to P1 and P2, while P1 and P2 are waiting for regulations and more information. And if the minister never appears, then I think we have our answer. So it could certainly run concurrently if this is disposed of. No, so I think we could just dispose of this in whichever direction council wishes to, and if it's not accepted, we could look at a subsequent motion after P2 to request the minister come meet with all of council. I'd have no problem with that.
Isn't it?
So, Councillor Richter, do you wish to speak again? Go ahead.
No, but that was the intent of the motion, to extend an invitation for him to meet with council and staff.
Yeah, but your motion would delay this until potentially into April with the way you worded your referral.
And I think that us putting for lack of a better term, screws on the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Housing with repealing, like we're threatening them. You don't win friends and influence people by threatening them.
I'm not following the logic of a threatening. I'm actually trying to do right by a number of people by bringing this to council who are spending money on plans.
In my opinion,
Councillor Richter, I don't interrupt
the
you, so
way
again, I'm just gonna say again. So I don't interrupt you, Councillor Richter. I think everybody gets a chance to speak. So I think it's challenging because I think you're characterizing it as a threat. We can't sort of let that stand. That's not what's occurring. I think it's just policy. They're making policy, and we have to comply with provincial legislation. And I think it's here for council to look at that. This is the result of Bill 44 in these three plans. And if we're fine with that, then we're fine with that. And if we're not fine with that, then I think we deserve to make the public and the property owners aware. Do you wish to respond? Go ahead. But please don't interrupt you. I don't interrupt you.
Oh, come on. All right, so the way this motion, which, by the way, was run on global TV at NewsHour
Is this on the
today.
referral, Councillor Richter?
Oh,
Is this on global news? We're on the referral here.
No,
on the
no,
referral.
there's a bit of media grandstanding going on out there right now is all I'm saying. And I'm saying if you're going to media grandstand and issue, I still say it's a threat. We're going to repeal the whole thing. Then why would anybody in their right mind come and talk to us? We should be proceeding first with a formal and respectful invitation to please come and talk to us and give us some direction, which I think is the motion that's on the floor right now. And if they don't come, then they've sent a clear message, at which point your motion may or may not be in order. But to jump right into it and then say, well, let's run it concurrently, no. Why would they even come and talk to us? We're not being respectful.
Yeah, so I'm going to have a few more points. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just on the topic of them talking to us in consultation, prior to these policies being created, was there consultation done with the Township of Langley on the creation of the provincial statutes?
No, Your Worship.
I'm wondering, was there a consultation done with a panel of professionals and experts on the policy itself? And was there a discussion around potentially implications on different types of municipalities across the province?
Your Worship, we're not aware of how the province formulated their matter. I suspect it was done by the civil service with some political oversight, but who was part of that process, we're unaware.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So on the referral, so I've met with the minister twice, and I believe it's been made. I mean, I've accepted the fact that there will be no exemption, but it's worded this way to hold out some hope within regulations, and for council to consider that process formally, and it can certainly vote it down or do something, dispose of it differently if it were to come forward. I continue to maintain that it's irresponsible to proceed with plans that are projected now to be 120,000 residents without parking requirements. So I just, that's my position. Council disagrees. I respect that. Advocating for this community when the media calls me is my job. And, maybe some others don't like that, but that's my job and I'm going to do my job. And I've been trying to do everything I can to highlight the significant issues this is going to have in the Township of Langley. And this is here for council to consider. I believe we can invite the minister separately while considering this process, because I don't expect the invitation will be accepted. So with that, I'm going to call the question on P1 referral. That referral is defeated with Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Martins, Councillor Van Popte, Councillor Pratt, Councillor Ferguson opposed. Now back to the main motion. Councillor Ferguson, did you have anything else?
I just want to continue on with the fact that, this has been an interesting discussion and that everyone is concerned about it. Transparency is something that the administrator and his staff have indicated. We have, the province and the municipality haven't had a lot of discussions with the minister about. So perhaps we could ask, it'd be a subsequent, that'd be item number 5 or another item that we could ask the minister and his staff to come before council, invited to come before council. Certainly don't shut doors on people regardless of what decisions we make at council. And so that would be a simple thing, and they could ask them at their convenience.
Yeah, I think we can deal with that under other business, Councillor Ferguson.
Yep.
Appreciate that. So seeing no speakers, I'll call the question on P1. That carries. Councillor Richter opposed. Item P2, similar situation, I'll move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on P2? I have this here because, Ms. Bauer, do you want to highlight, maybe I just did confer with you on a process for reconsideration. This is trying to avoid up to 18 reconsideration motions. I just wanted to have council weigh in first. We have a situation where there's 18 applications for development at third reading, approximately 255 lots, if I recall, which are now 40 UPA with no parking requirements. And so I think it's important for council to at least be made aware of that and have an option of how it may want to look at those and potentially refer them back or reapprove them or reconsider them in some way based upon the implications of Bill 44, such that I don't believe it was ever the council's intent, and some of them may or may not have had public hearings. I didn't check that. Public certainly wasn't public consultation around creating 40 UPA subdivisions with no parking requirements. I say no, you're not allowed to impose parking on the units after the first one. So minimal parking requirements, 40 UPA. Do not believe that's what council was approving, but it's here for council's consideration. It's worded in such a way that those could come forward to be adjudicated separately, or council can let them proceed if it wishes to do that. So that's what this is here for. Is there any other discussion on P2? Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, I just want to confirm, Your Worship, this kind of reconsideration motion here isn't necessarily saying that we're not supportive of housing in those locations. It's the type and form and character of the housing that would be permitted. Is that
We have
correct?
18 applications that have some component, a lot or relatively small amounts of single-family subdivision.
Right.
Some without on-street parking, some are front-loaded. So, so now they would have no on-street parking, which I believe the minister assumes all single-family homes have, or whatever their assumptions are to take it in this direction, that in some areas of Aldergrove where there's no transit, you'll now potentially have 4 units per a lot with no parking requirement, minimal parking requirements. This is not what the council approved, so I mean, it's brought here just to be responsible and give council the option. That makes sense, yeah. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, do we know how many of those applications would like to continue on in the, with the plans that they already have for single family? I mean, if we know that they're going to build single family, could we not just allow those to go through?
Mr. Backen, my understanding is that the Bill 44 grants the right to 4 units by right, so the Township of Langley at this point would not have any ability to confirm that they'll proceed with what their council's intent would be, which would be single-family housing with secondary suites. So the problem would be ensuring that they move forward as approved by improved in principle. Mr. Richardson, can you help with me with a bit with that?
Thank you, Worship. You're correct. There's 256 units currently sitting at third reading, and they're actively sitting at third reading, so there'll be various stages of advancing to final reading. As you've noted, staff's understanding of Bill 44 would allow them, if they do come to finalization, the current single-family detached, those 256 units would have one primary single-family dwelling, which is allowed by the bylaw, but the Bill 44 would then, by right, allow them to have 4, Your Worship, as currently understood.
But by reconsidering them, don't we have to allow it anyways?
So the council could potentially look at each one and potentially have custom referrals for each one. So say, for example, one is 1/3 single family, 2/3 row home. It could make it the entire development row home, and then you would be able to control the parking requirements for row home, since we're still allowed to do that until that's taken away too, potentially. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
So now, to me, it's to bring it forward, and it can either be, say, okay, we don't mind it, it's only 2 lots, or maybe it's 50 lots that are now 40 UPA. And so what does council want to do with that? And that could be referred back to make changes, each one. It's some work, but it would provide clarity for allowing these proposals to move forward.
Okay.
The intent is to modify them to move forward, not to halt them.
And do you know how long that this is going to go for? Same with the repeal. Is it months? Is it weeks? Do we know when this legislation is imminent, I believe?
Legislation is passed. We're expecting the regulations by Christmas.
Yeah, okay, that's what I meant, the regulations.
So we would
Okay, by
potentially
Christmas.
see this in January.
Okay, and then we can make decisions based on the regulations after. So like we're not leaving these applications in stream you know, for time in memoriam, just because we don't know what to do with it.
Correct. So my intention is to provide certainty for staff and the property owner, the development community, then, and work with them to adjudicate each one, to advance them to an acceptable conclusion, potentially with some consultation with the community versus what the province has done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And it might be a premature question, but with the regulations that may be coming and with the legislation that was passed, to Councillor Kuhn's point about a proponent who may wish to advance a single-family project just because that's what they have the expertise to build or the capital to build, whatnot, is there the potential for covenants to be put in place between the proponent, between the municipality to secure that as a single-family project in perpetuity? And is there the ability for the provincial government to overrule those types of covenants anyways?
So it's possible that'll come in regulations, but the legislation is very clear on by right. So Mr. Back, in my reading and consultation with you and Mr. Gunner was that those could be discharged since they would be contravening provincial legislation. So they could agree to them and then just simply get them discharged. Do I have that? Is that too simplistic?
No, I think that's a good summary, Your Worship. The challenge we face is we're not certain what by right means. We have certainly a level of understanding. They may explicitly preclude covenants, or they may be silent on them, in which case it may take a judicial review to determine if the covenants are inconsistent. And when that's achieved, then whatever the result is will apply to all such covenants.
Understood. Thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, I'll call the question on P2. That carries. Councillor Richter opposed. So Councillor Ferguson, go ahead. You wanted to make that motion.
Wanted a quick one.
Yes, that's correct. We did amend the agenda. I'll come back to you, Councillor Ferguson. Yeah, I forgot that we amended the agenda. Yes, correct. I forgot about that. Councillor Van Popte, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is just a simple motion. We've all got a copy of it. Reading through our DL package, this letter came in from the Aldergrove Veterans and Seniors Society in regards to just getting them some funding since they're no longer allowed to solicit for donations for providing meals. So this is just providing $3,000 of council contingency and then helping them next year apply through the grant program. So motion as presented.
Second. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Bailey, go ahead.
Yeah, this is the same organization that we helped out last year, and I know you can't do a friendly amendment, but the name of the organization is actually the Aldergrove Veterans. So you've got to put that into the name. It's just the AVSSA.
Yeah, I think the intent's captured. It says in Aldergrove there, so hopefully we'll get that corrected. Yep. Any other discussion on P3? Seeing none, I call the question on P3. That carries unanimously. So now, Councillor Ferguson, go ahead.
Yeah, see, Mr. Mayor, as you know, we've just passed a motion earlier on about the Brookswood-Fernridge Community Plan and how we indeed wanted to repeal that based on changing the density significantly to a higher number that we're bound by the province to do. I wanted to know that since we've met, that we could actually ask you and administration and staff to meet with them, or else them even come to council as either a delegation or a presentation to talk to about their plan, Bill 44, and other bills as well, and how that can indeed proceed, and we could discuss it with them and ask them what exactly they're asking for and how it affects our plans. I'm sure that I'm not alone in this province when I talk about other communities that have the same challenge, but we can only at this table talk about Langley's concerns. So basically, it would just be a motion to request the minister to come before with the staff.
Is there a seconder to that? Yeah. Seconded by Councillor Martins. Do you want to discuss it? I think you covered it, Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, thank you very much.
Any other discussion on that? Call the question on P4. That carries unanimously. Any other business? No. Get a motion to, is there any other items? Is there any items, special closed items?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Get a motion to resolve in a special close, but is there any other items?
Yes.
Councillor Richter?
I want to remove item I1 from the agenda.
Okay, so we'll process that when we get it moved. Councillor Van Popte, do you have an item?
Personnel.
personnel item. Is there any other items? Get a motion to resolve into special close, moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Councillor Richter, you have an
Yeah,
amendment?
remove item I1 from the agenda.
There a seconder to that? Is there a seconder to that? Does everybody know, anybody wish to second that, just to give you a chance to check? Yeah, yeah. Is there any seconder to that? No, not seeing seconder. Councilor Richter. So with that, I'll call the question on resolving into special closed. That carries to Councillor Richter. Opposed. Get a motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Van Popta. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.